I suspect it's going to remain very full. Okay, so thank you for tolerating the short delay. Why don't we bring the regular session February 20th council meeting to order? Can we have the roll call, please? Oh, let's do the pledge of the flag first. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now can we have the roll call?
Councilmember Lambert?
Mike?
I'm here. Here.
Councilmember Lewis? Here. Councilmember Weiss?
Yep.
Vice Mayor DeGolia?
Yeah.
Mayor Whitmer?
Here. Okay, next we have a swearing in, oath of office. Joe, you gonna do that?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
You know, I never thought I would see the day when I first started here, where before I would have to come up and read something and have to bring these, so. That's right. We have Diego Romero. I had the pleasure of meeting Diego a couple years ago. He's one of those guys that was persistent in his desire to work here. He attended the academy, South Bay Regional in San Jose, and I got the pleasure of actually teaching down there about once a week during his course. So I got to see him from start to finish, and we got one of the best candidates, in my opinion, who's ever gone through there. This guy's maturity level, his intelligence, and just his ability to interact with people is a huge asset, and we are very lucky to have him. Diego was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, spent the majority of his youth in the neighboring Redwood City. He currently resides with his wife Erica, his son Noah in Hayward. Diego enjoys mountain biking and spending time outdoors. He attended Woodside High School, so he's a local high school grad, and obtained his bachelor's degree from San Jose State University in 2014. His field of study was justice studies, with a goal of obtaining a career in law enforcement, so goal achieved. He gained experience in community supervision as a student intern with U.S. Probation in San Francisco, so he does have a prior, we'll call it a law enforcement background. He was hired previously by the U.S. Pretrial Services Agency with the U.S. District Court as a pretrial services officer, and as a pretrial services officer, Diego supervised more than 40 defendants who were pending federal charges throughout sections of South Bay and Central California. So he didn't come to us like some of our newer recruits that don't have any experience. He does have capacity and some experience. He has here with him tonight his wife and son, Erica and Noah. Thank you for coming. That's Dad Jose, Mom Norma, Sister Gina, her husband Angel, parents-in-laws, Jose and Rosa, sister-in-law Sarah, nephew Isaiah, and niece Natalie.
There we go.
All right, so we're gonna swear you know, we're gonna actually turn it a little bit so you can face the crowd, and I'm gonna face this way. Okay, go ahead and repeat after me. Raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Diego Romero,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and of the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I bear true faith and allegiance
that I bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and of the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
that I will well and faithfully discharge
that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations. Been on here.
Congratulations. Glad to have you.
Look forward to seeing you around town.
Thank you.
Stop eating that.
Okay, on the agenda was a annual report from Selby Lane Schools. That's gonna happen next month, so if you're here for that, we'll see you next month. Are there any public comments before we start? Public comments, hopefully they'll be for items that are not on the agenda, or if you have a time commitment, we'll allow. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Jim Jans, 95 Wilburn Avenue, Atherton. I'm here to quickly compliment and thank Robert Ovadia, who unfortunately is not here, but you can pass on this information to him. Thank him and the Public Works Department for solving the flooding problem at the Wilburn Lake on the intersection of Wilburn and Snowden. I'm going to pass around a couple of pictures. This is the first one, was in January. Sorry, I only have one of each of these. This is the before condition. 30 years ago, I will mention my house is on the right in that picture. And 30 years ago, twice, the flood extended up my driveway, under the garage door, through the garage, went out the back door and into the swimming pool. Water from the street. In the intervening time, the city did some repairs, beefed up the drainage right at that intersection. And that intersection drains the entire Lloyd Park subdivision. They beefed it up, kept the city's portion of it clean, and for the last couple of decades, it's worked just fine. But ultimately, it runs between my property and my neighbor's property, goes back to the Caltrain tracks. It either drains in a ditch there or in a pipe, that leads to the county system. And apparently, in the last few years, the county or the Caltrain portion has gotten plugged up. It's, like I said, a couple of decades it's been working fine, but the last couple of years, we started getting floods, like in that picture, which when the rain stopped, it would drain in half an hour. This time in January, when that was taken, it took like a day for that to drain after the rain stopped. Somehow Robert got the county and or Caltrain involved, and they apparently never understood that this was a problem that was so impactful in our neighborhood. And the county cleaned out their part of it, and this is an after picture. This was taken a week ago. Recall last Tuesday, Wednesday, it rained for like 2-3 days straight. I was out of town. I was really concerned I was going to have to come home and find my garage flooded. Instead, I got copies of that picture sent to me, and it was like, even while it was raining, completely clear. So you did a terrific job. I really appreciate it. Please pass on my compliments to the department.
Oh,
Thank you.
that's wonderful.
Why does it say flooded?
Well,
I'm
that
just
little
teasing.
sun's always
kinda-
there.
The city sort of put that out there as soon as winter started, and they took it away in the spring. The signs are gone now.
Okay.
Where are you gonna go fishing out there?
Okay, any other public comments? Jim?
Jim Massey, 7 Lloyden Drive. I'm here tonight to address the serial violations of the Brown Act committed by members or a member of the Rail Committee. I believe these violations of state law are an outgrowth of an attempt and a plan to stifle and diffuse public comment in order to further an agenda for a preconceived result that would then be presented to this council. More on that later. First, would be, I want to establish a benchmark. Some years ago, as a member of the Finance Committee at a notarized, agendized meeting in this chamber, the chair of the committee involved the committee in a Brown Act violation. The city manager immediately stopped the meeting, terminated, and it was since vacated. The meeting was later rescheduled at a later date and was put on only after all members had been trained and rebriefed on Brown Act actions. It has come to my attention that a member or members of the rail committee have been sanctioned not only once, but twice for violations of the Brown Act in a very short period of time. I believe there are possibly others. I believe the violation occurred within a 60-day period when the two rail committee meetings were in place. One was a joint meeting with this council, and the second was the rail committee meeting held 2 weeks ago. It is hard to believe that after receiving a sanction for a Brown Act violation, a member or member of the committees would ignore it and proceed to get another. It is even harder to believe this happened when two of the committee members are ex-councilmen and past mayors of this town, while a third is a past PUC member and has recently run for statewide office. These gentlemen, with their vast and past experience in government, should have immediately realized these violations. I would ask to continue with the 3 minutes. Thank you. These violations. What is going on? You almost can't make this stuff up. I believe that part of the reason might be an attitude that has become prevalent in our country, such as, surely these rules can't apply to us. Don't they know who we are? We're the ruling elites. We make the rules. And the lower class peasants, general riffraff, and deplorables clinging to their guns and Bibles will obey them. We don't have to. We're the elites. But not us. What to do? Possible remedies. 1, vacate the last 2 rail committee meetings as they are tainted by these violations and possibly others, and not just one violation. The last committee meeting is particularly note since it contained votes and recommendations to this council. 2, withdraw from tonight's agenda item 14 in light of the previously discussed violations, particularly of the last committee meeting. I believe there is a saying within the legal community that goes, fruit of the poisonous tree, which this surely is. 3, reschedule the rail committee meeting with an emphasis on public discourse, but only after a training session and review of the Brown Act has been carried out for the committee members. 4, release all public documentation, emails, work product, letters, documentation to the public and on the website and possibly to the state of California. 5, and this one is really tough for me. It took me a long time, it's extremely hard for me to put this, but here we go. The 3 gentlemen previously mentioned, 2 ex-mayors and a candidate for state office, should be held to a higher standard. They should be given the opportunity to resign and withdraw from the rail committee and not have any future activities with that committee or rail issues within Atherton. This option is presented to them only because of their past long-term service to the community. If they do not do so in good faith, they should be removed from these positions with the same sanctions as a resignation. This whole situation is most unfortunate for the city of Atherton as we try to grope with the issues of the rail and Caltrain. However, I urge the council to err on the side of caution and have the courage to do the right thing. Foster and restore clean, open, and transparent government for the citizens of Atherton. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Hopefully we'll hold it to 3 minutes. Okay.
Jack Ringham, Fair Oaks Lane. When I decided to come to the meeting tonight, I went to the town website and looked up the agenda. And there are plenty of items on the agenda, and many of them referred to other documents that were not attached. I would think that all the things that are going to be addressed at the council meeting that are covered in other documents should be public information and included with the agendas for the council meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay.
Does that work all right?
Beautiful.
I made a presentation last night at the fire district, and I'm going to repeat it here tonight. And basically, I'm concerned about the safety of the 9,000 children that go to school in Atherton every day. And I've did some analysis of the Douglas High School in Florida, 350-page report. And I just think that we need to do more in Atherton to protect those children, and I'm suggesting that we form a foundation that would be funded by both the town of Atherton and the fire district, and individuals in the town that wanted to contribute to the foundation to staff additional police and equipment to be able to be ready for a terrorist attack similar to the ones that have happened in Florida, Connecticut, and Colorado. So if you read those reports, you can see what could have been rather than what happened. And it could have been a lot better as far as reducing the number of deaths if it were done quicker and more prepared. And I'm suggesting that a separate foundation funded by both the fire district and the town of Atherton would be a good solution, and I'm willing to take that on myself. So I'm not sure when I'll get it in my schedule, but sometime in the next 2 months, I'll come back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments?
Little shorty over here. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Emily Finn, and I'm representing Green Waste Recovery. And I just wanted to come here tonight to let you know that we understand you have an item on the agenda, and we're very interested in having the opportunity to participate in an RFP process. We do understand that you reached out to the towns of Portola Valley and Woodside, and as you know, we are in a process of negotiating some extensions to those agreements. I was saddened that we can't make the timing coincide, but we're definitely interested in pursuing opportunities with you in the future. So thank you for your time.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
Any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public comments. We did have a closed session, so Bill, would you like to report?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the city council met in closed session this evening to discuss 2 items. The first was public employee performance evaluation of city manager. Discussion was had and no action was taken. Conference with legal counsel, existing litigation. With respect to ongoing litigation, the council discussed it and gave direction to the city attorney to confer with outside counsel as to how to proceed, or on proceeding, and that was the net result of the closed session.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then, city manager's report, George.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You have the report before you in the packet. There wasn't any significant Q&A on this during our one-on-ones, but staff's here to answer any questions the council might have. The commander's here to provide an oral report to the council if desired on any updates of the burglaries that are occurred in town recently. That's the pleasure of the council.
Any questions for Joe or for city manager? Oh, Mike?
Yeah, I would like to hear an update on the police activity with regard to the burglaries and other events that have occurred.
I agree, because there was just one yesterday.
And it was a mail theft, that's all. Okay, go ahead.
This is like the second mail theft that I've heard about in Atherton.
Can I just add in, from the police report, the public report, it sounded like the MO of that burglary up on Fletcher was similar to the ones that had happened previously in terms of somebody breaking into the back of the entrance.
Yes, that's correct.
So,
Yeah, I'll give you a quick,
Second floor.
Perfect.
So since January, so in the month of January of this year, we had 6 burglaries. We had 2 residential burglaries so far this month in February. There was about a 3-week break of not having any residential burglaries. In February, for the end of January and most of February, we have stepped up our burglary suppression efforts, meaning we have a lot more people out. We have marked vehicles. And as a result of that, for February, we've made 1 weapons arrest, 1 burglary arrest from the Benson Old School, 3 mail theft arrests, and to include possession of stolen property. 4 out of the 5 people that were arrested did have a theft history. Fortunately, right now, even though they do have a theft history, we don't think that the people that we have arrested are our burglars. So the crime suppression continues until they are apprehended.
Mike, do you have any further questions for Joe?
No, thank you.
Anybody else have a question for Joe?
Can I just ask Joe, can you just expand a little bit on the Ridgeview property, or Fletcher property, excuse me? I think that's kind of where you guys were going.
Yeah, so the Fletcher, we've had some that have been second story. This was not a second story. This was a first story. First story. It was a ground level window smash. Same MO. Can't go into a ton of detail, but I'll just say that we haven't determined exactly what's been taken from the property, and although we can't prove it, we have every reason to believe that it's the burglars that have been hitting the town for the past few months.
Was the house vacant? Where the resident wasn't there?
There wasn't anybody in the house at the time.
Can I just make a comment? I noticed that on weekends and evenings, both you, the chief, and the detectives and other sergeants have been out more. Is that kind of your expansion of the general beat structure?
Yeah, it is. And, if it were just Atherton that were getting hit, we would probably get neighboring agencies just to keep an eye on the borders that border Atherton. And while they are doing that, the county right now is really getting beat up with burglaries, residential burglaries, thefts, and Hillsborough to be one of them, some similar. We believe that some of the same suspects in our town are some of the same suspects in their town, based on same MO, based on time. So yeah, we've been in contact with their detectives as well.
Okay, I just noticed there was more bodies, and you don't normally work evenings, and the chief doesn't normally work weekends, so I'm just thanking you guys for your additional efforts.
Our pleasure.
And I continue to get good feedback from residents with regards to the meeting that we had on the 31st of January. So again, thanks for actually having the staff there, providing the information that they did. Although, some people are, that had gotten burglarized, they're harder to be satisfied, but very good feedback from a lot of people, and thank you, and it's great that you're catching some of these people and you're putting information out, because also people are pretty upbeat about the fact that something's happening now, so thank you for that.
Our pleasure, thank you.
Okay, any questions for George on his report? Mike?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Then we have a consent calendar, which is items 8 through 13. Does anybody want to pull on the council? Anybody want to pull item 8 through 13? Any of those?
I have a question about item 11.
Okay. Anybody else? Does any of the people in the audience, the public, would you like to have any of those items pulled for discussion and separate vote? Okay, seeing none. We'll quickly go over item 11. We have a lot of people here, so I want to get to 14. So,
It's just a question.
Yeah.
It's a question, it should be very quick, it's simply, I know that a new law was passed related to disclosure of personnel files for police officers, SB 1421, getting quite a lot of attention, and I just wondered how that affected our record keeping policy, if at all.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, it is true that SB 1421 and I believe it's AB 748 both have to do with disclosure of certain information to the public upon request. We've reviewed all of our records to see if there are any pertinent files that would be subject to disclosure going backwards, and the answer is we don't find any. Secondly, with respect to retroactivity, the law does not on its face say it was retroactive. So the law itself has been challenged in court up and down the state a few times, and the last decision, which I think was the wisest one, came out of Ventura, where the court said, look, the local decisions are starting to split and go in different directions. We really need to get an appellate decision on this before we can really state with certainty that it's only a prospective law and it doesn't retroactively go back into the officer's files. And saying that, he said what the city attorneys have pretty much all agreed to, any file that we would possess that could be subject to turning over are not going to be destroyed. We have none in that category. So, I mean, I can tell you more about those laws, but I don't think that's what Mike's asking for.
Yeah, that's
All right, so.
I just have since you pulled this for discussion, I just had a question or a clarification that really we're only looking at 3 files that are being destroyed, plus the 2016 citations, which would be numerous, right? Is that correct?
That's correct.
I think that's correct.
And none of these files have current ongoing litigation or disposition or anything.
That's true.
Okay.
Okay. All right, can we have a motion then to move forward with the consent?
Can I ask a question just before we move it? Is Mike recused on item number 12? So I'll make a motion with Mike's recusal on item number 12 to approve the consent.
I'll second.
Thank you. Can someone give me guidance on how to vote on that or what I do?
You vote for everything except for 12.
You just have to notice, I mean, it's been done by Councilmember Weiss, but the notification should come from you that you are recusing yourself from item 11, is it?
12.
Item 12, and other than that, you're voting however you vote for the rest of the consent.
Okay, well then let me just note for the record, I'm recusing myself from item 12 because of the location of my home. And other than that, I'll vote, I guess, consistent with the motion. When the time comes, I'll vote aye.
Okay, we have a second?
I did the second.
Okay, all right, so we have because we have a council member that is on the phone, we have to do a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lembris?
Aye.
Yeah. Councilmember Lewis?
Aye.
Councilmember Weiss?
Aye.
Vice Mayor DeGolia?
Aye.
Mayor Whitmer?
Aye. Okay, now we move on to item number 14, which is discuss and if appropriate adopt amendments to the rail policy, provide direction and feedback to the staff regarding the response to the rail Caltrain business plan and establishment of an ad hoc subcommittee to work with staff with regarding transit-oriented activities here through Atherton. So, George?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. You have the staff report before you, and it basically goes through the history of the town's joint meeting with the rail committee on January 9th. At that study session, the council and the rail committee provided some feedback on the Caltrain business plan, and there was some intense discussion about the Caltrain station itself, as well as the town's rail policy and the future of that station in Atherton and service level. Since then, the council asked that the rail committee provide some specific feedback and further discussion on the town's rail policy and the station. They did so at their last meeting that they had. That feedback is also in the staff report under the analysis about rail service levels and rail policy. The rail committee provided that Caltrain, their amendments to the rail policy suggested Caltrain must restore full weekday service. Caltrain must complete a capital project to remove the holdout station in town. Ensure any long-term corridor rail plan limits 2 tracks through Atherton. Modernization of the rail system must minimize and fully mitigate any environmental impact to the town. Caltrain must take all necessary steps to make rail transit through the rail corridor as safe as possible, including the maintenance of quad gates at Fair Oaks Lane and the establishment of quad gates at the Watkins Avenue crossing. And last, Caltrain must continue to enforce the compliance requirements for the Fair Oaks Lane quiet zone. So that's what the rail committee suggested for the town's rail policy. That's before the council this evening. Also before the council this evening is the potential formation of an ad hoc subcommittee to talk through with Caltrain the potential future of the Atherton rail station, whichever way that goes, full service, less service, no service. And also the potential to have that subcommittee look at SB 50. It's been since suggested that we bifurcate that issue and just have the subcommittee that might be formed by the mayor to address discussions with staff and Caltrain. And then with respect to the SB 50 issue and housing along the corridor, affordable housing along the corridor, use our resources within the League of California Cities and our league staff liaison to assist with that conversation rather than a subcommittee dealing with Caltrain.
And I think we should work through CCAG also.
Yes.
I would like to give a little update on that.
Excellent. That concludes the staff report. So staff's here to answer any questions. Again, Robert's not here. He's the staff liaison of the rail committee. So you're kind of looking at me to answer any of those questions. And the city attorney is also prepared to address any of the right-of-way questions that came up at the last council meeting as well.
Do you want to make your comment now, or do you want to?
Well, I do have a couple of clarifying questions, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Why don't we ask Mike first, okay?
Sure.
Mike, do you have any, oh, you're not, is he allowed to? Okay, do you have any questions on this station?
I don't, but I would appreciate it if Mr. Connors could clarify that I'm able to participate in this conversation.
I would appreciate it if I could clarify it too. It's not very clear who is the exact title. What is clear is that the quote, rail lines are owned by the public entity.
Sorry, sir. He's asking about his ability to participate in this conversation.
Yes, he can. I believe he can.
The short answer was yes.
That's fine. Just wanted to hear that. Wanted everybody to hear that. Okay.
Yeah, I think that we've already had the Fair Political Practices Commission talk about the council members participating in rail issues, and they seem to agree that it's almost like the public generally exception because everybody in town is affected somewhat by the noise, and therefore it's okay that you were elected to represent the public.
Jerry Carlson.
Yeah.
Former member, council member Jerry Carlson went through that and got a ruling to the effect, so it's fine.
Okay, and in light of the public comments earlier, I did ask through Mr. Wiest to ask the council, should we continue on with that? And his advice was that we should continue with this item.
His short response was yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay, so any other questions?
I have a couple of clarifying questions about
Sure.
the item. Is there a pressure from Caltrain for us to make a decision about, I guess in light of their business plan, which is not going to be kind of finalized until 2020, about whether or not we're going to close the station, keep the station open, limited or full or whatever. So that's one of my questions. The other one is, I guess I'd like to define full service, because I think that would have an impact about whether or not we would fall under the requirement of SB 50 in its current form, and there's at what level of returning service to the station on weekdays would trigger that. And Senator Scott Wiener made a presentation at CCAG last Thursday, and actually the County of San Mateo, all the different cities made presentations to him as to what every city is doing in the form of adding lots and lots of housing. And he was pretty much dazzled about the aggressive nature of some of the cities in our county. I made a presentation about our circumstances and how we really should be exempt from his requirements. He says, I don't see how you would be impacted by the SB 50. You know, if you only had weekend service and your situation, but if you restored the train to like full service, and I said, well, what would that mean? You know, how many trains? He says, well, write up some language and submit it to us. You know, and he said that to all the other cities too. You know, like, show us what you're doing, and this is not a final bill. It's still in draft. Our staff are still working on it, and we're because the complaint is that his bill is like a one-size-fits-all, and it's very black and white, and it's this or that, and and then it leaves the specter that we are going to be impacted. And I know that, and I shared with him the concerns of our residents and their fears that if it passes, that we will have 4 to 5 story condominiums along, our railroad. And one of our residents actually even said she was approached by a developer, right? And crazy things like that. So I think if we can define it, so I think that we do have an opportunity if we work with the CCAG board, we work with the biggest cities, and do an aggressive approach to get some language put into the bill that defines the criteria specifically, that then we can make a better judgment about what to do with the train station. Okay, because most of the people that I hear saying close it is because of the development. Although there is the noise issue, I know, but we've always had the noise issue for years and years and years. But anyway, so and I guess my question was, can the ad hoc committee do that? But if we're going to separate it, I think that's a good way to go.
I think that's a good idea for the ad hoc committee to draft the language, and then we can submit it as a town. I think that's good. A great idea,
Yeah,
actually.
work with the other agencies also.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for? I guess it'd be George.
I don't have any questions.
All right. I don't think we have any public comments, but if somebody definitely has one, we'll take it. Public comments on this item.
Of course he was
Jack.
kidding. Of course he was kidding.
I was only teasing.
We don't have any speaker cards. We don't do speaker cards too much.
Come on up. Can you come up here, please? Sorry, Jack.
Sorry, get it recorded.
One of the criteria of SB 50 for being subject or exempt from its provisions is whether or not it's a job-rich housing project. And it looks as though job-rich is defined by the Department of Housing and Community Development and the Office of Planning and Research. And it seems to me we ought to take steps to find out whether Atherton borders a job-rich project, how much of them are within our borders and how much are not. If we're job-rich, no matter what Caltrain does, then we could be subject to SB 50. So let's find out whether we're job-rich or not. Also, I think we should do whatever we can to have SB 50 changed so that it only covers towns or cities over a certain threshold of population, so that it doesn't treat Los Angeles the same as it treats Atherton. So I think maybe 10 or 15,000 would be a good cutoff.
You talk to some of the cities in San Mateo County, they go 30, 40,000 because
Paul?
Thank you. I would like to pass out to each of you a copy of a short paper I've prepared that describes some of the reasoning behind the action that the Rail Committee took on February 5th at our meeting, in which we arrived at the conclusion that the city manager reported.
Yeah, you were asked by Robert to come and speak, is that correct?
Well, that's what I had
On
to say.
behalf of the Rail Committee.
And you can read it faster than I can speak it.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Mayor,
I'd
only
like
problem is
to
the
add
public,
one more
the public
comment.
can't hear what.
Yeah, go ahead, why don't you read it, that's fine.
No.
No, I'm not, we don't have the timer on because you were asked by staff to come
Okay.
speak.
The
there's extra copies, maybe.
The weekend service that Caltrain is giving Atherton now is very little or no value to any of the residents of Atherton. The existence of the station obliges a train engineer to blow his horn when he comes into the station. And these blasts are continuing annoyance to the nearby residents, and we heard from many of those residents at our meeting on the 5th about the noise. But despite many of the Caltrain statements about post-electrification renewed weekday service to Atherton, it's unlikely that Atherton will ever receive more than a token amount of service. The reports that we've seen so far, there was only one that listed train stops in Atherton, and that was one train each way, early morning and late evening. That is not service that will take people to work and back from work. So that does not constitute full service by any stretch of the imagination. And the last version of the Caltrain business plan that we saw in the Rail Committee, the Atherton was marked to be determined in terms of the amount of service that would be given. If the station were to be closed now, we could extend the quiet zone all the way down to Watkins as soon as we had the quad gates at Watkins. But on the other hand, if we close the station, it will never be reopened. So I think this is an action that needs to be taken with the greatest of care. We would not be able to muster sufficient traffic through the station to ever encourage reopening it once it was closed. At the February meeting, we had a very thorough discussion about what should be done about this. It would be good to provide the sound relief, but at this point, after the years of experience here, that seems to be an illogical thing to do. We're better off to keep our requirements as the city manager read them and see what Caltrain will do for us. They have the option, of course, to terminate service at any time, and there's nothing we can do about that. But we certainly should not do it for them. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
My name is Frank Burke, Lloyden Park. I sent the council a letter, so I'll be brief in summarizing it, but it's only fair to the people here that I speak it in case somebody wants to take the contrary position. I'm an actual Caltrain rider. I don't ride it every day, but I ride it frequently to the city. I agree with the statement that the weekend service is meaningless. Weekday local service is equally meaningless to anybody trying to go to San Francisco because the transit time is 85 minutes from Atherton to San Francisco, and then you've got to get on a bus to get to downtown. Conversely, the transit time from Redwood City to the city on a limited service train is 35 minutes. So I would urge the council to negotiate with Caltrain to go ahead and close the station. I think it would give us some additional possibilities in the plaza that will be in front of our beautiful new town center. It'll help with the noise problem and other things. That being said, I do believe that accessibility to rail transit is a very important value to everybody. We need to get people out of their cars, because if you go either to San Jose or San Francisco, you encounter serious traffic. So I believe that you should go further than that and come up with a plan for getting accessibility for Atherton residents to either the Menlo Park station or the Redwood City station, both of which have limited train service. And I propose two possibilities in my letter, one of which would be to think about a van service. Somewhat it would be an on-demand service that would pick up people on call. The trouble with that is that I think it's proven throughout the United States to be somewhat of an expensive option on a per ride basis. So a cost-efficient option would be to partner with what are called transportation network companies, which are Uber and Lyft, which are currently partnering, if I may just extend for just 30 seconds or so, they're partnering with communities all around the United States. They're in 50 partnerships now. Uber has put up on their website a desire to partner with additional communities. And I understand something that happened since my letter is that they have rolled out in Denver a transit button on the Uber app that literally will bring up and show a person how to get to the nearest either rail or bus, depending on which you want to go to, and then how much time it will take to get where you're trying to get to, and then how to get to the ultimate destination once you get there. I actually saw a beta app that actually applies it to here, and I looked at a few spots, and it told me, depending on the time of day, that I would have to go and take a Samtrans bus, or other times of day I could go to a Caltrain station. I think that someone, either from the council or this ad hoc committee or somebody on behalf of the town, should try to meet with Uber and Lyft, because there's all sorts of possibilities laid out in that DePaul study that are available. And I think it would behoove the town, from a futuristic perspective, to get that level of accessibility for our residents built into our future plan, so that we can have accessibility to good rapid train service. Thank you.
Wally?
Wally Sleeth, I'll be very brief. I agree wholeheartedly with the gentleman who just talked here. What I want to stress is, I took the train for probably 30 years back and forth to the city. I don't think we should be so quick in determining that there's not an interest in train service, either to San Jose or to San Francisco. And the council and everybody in the train committee needs to look at this very, very carefully before tearing down the station here. Thank you.
Other public comments? Greg?
You know, I think it's a tough decision, and I just think that this SB 50 is a wild card. I went to the Palo Alto City Council where they had their lobbyist meet with the council, and I just think that it would be wise for the council to hire a lobbyist to work with their ad hoc committee so that we understand exactly how the SB 50 is progressing through the legislature, because I'm sure it won't be passed probably at 11:59 on the last day of August, because it's so controversial that, and having been through some of legislation that controversial, it usually wait till midnight of the last session, which is August 31st, and then they even adjust the clock 5 minutes to get a final vote. So I just think it'd be good to get a lobbyist to let you know exactly what the committees are saying on both houses. And we've got 3 members, we got 2 assembly members and 1 senator. that we should talk to directly, and I would suggest they come and speak to you. I mean, they're your representative. I mean, I think that that's the least they could do is come, or at least one of their chief of staffs, to let you know what their thinking is. Because I don't know what their thinking is. I just think that it would be thoughtful of them to come and talk to you, and then you'd have your lobbyist and you'd have your direct legislators, and then you could decide whether this really is or isn't an issue. Because I'm sure that's what's driving a lot of this, is whether that's going to pass or not in its present form. And you know, and I suggest that you get more active in ABAG and in ABAG. I sat in that meeting for 5.5 hours the other night to try and figure out what the hell was going on. And you know, there's a lot of different groups that are speaking, and he who speaks the most gets more recognition. So I encourage you to get more active, and if you can get on that executive council ABAG, I think that would be helpful if you could get more input into, because I know the MTC voted and ABAG to support as AB 50, and I do not understand that. So I wish you well in your endeavors, and hope you can keep up with it and decide when you got the right facts in front of you. Thank you.
Any other, yes?
Alex Key, African resident. So just to build upon what Jack was saying, what's a good definition of job rich? I just thought of one that might be fair to Atherton and fair in the light of SB 50, which is any community that has more jobs than homes should build more homes to account for all the jobs they're producing. So that would be fair to communities that already have a lot of housing, but not a lot of jobs, rather than force communities that have been doing their part to build more housing when they've already done their part. I know, San Jose has always felt like, they have already more homes than all the jobs, and Palo Alto has a ton of jobs, and San Jose has to deal with all the more residential costs that their taxes have to pay. So I think that would be fair to all communities if SB 50 were defined that way as job rich. But I wanted to say that that the ad hoc committee should talk with Caltrain as quickly as possible. And the reason why I say that is because the last time the town talked with Caltrain about something pretty big, which was the Pole Heights and Lloyd Park. And at the time we went to them, it was kind of late. And they said, well, for us to change it, we're gonna have to pay the money and a bunch of other things they tagged on. So I think if we talk to them early before they get too far in their business plan, it will then provide an opportunity where it doesn't cost them that much to say, okay, maybe we'll do something different that will help come to a mutual agreement between Atherton and Caltrain. So I think just talking to them as soon as possible is a good thing to do. Okay.
Any other public comments with regards to this item, which is about the train station?
I'm Randy Hodnett. Can you hear me? I live in Lloyd Park. It's tempting to assume that some of SB 50's provisions that override local zoning regulations would be toned down by the time the bill passes. But even if SB 50 weren't on the horizon, the issue about Caltrains wanting to increase their level of service is still going to be there. And that's going to be tough for them to do as long as they have to keep having trains stop at Atherton if they were going to have weekday service again. So the advantages of having a train station in Atherton have diminished over time, but the disadvantages have not. Thanks a lot.
Other public comments with regards to this item?
Barrett Anderson and my wife Regis, we live right over on McCormick Lane. We just became aware of this lately, and we hope that I've got Prop 50 here, and I think that would be everything that we've been warned about, and I just hope the council doesn't change the nature of Atherton, which is what brought us here 23 years ago. Thank you.
Other public comments?
Hey everybody, Matt, I live on Ferrets Lane, right around the corner. So you've heard a lot of comments on the subject. I'm not going to belabor them, just I'm trying to provide a little perspective. We talk about closing the station every day. Atherton residents drive to Menlo Park and Redwood City to get groceries, do shopping, but also when we talk about train service, we talk about going to the Menlo Park station like we need a passport. And I just want to keep this in perspective about we are not just an island unto itself, we are part of a larger Peninsula Rail community. Restoring service on the weekday requires that Caltrain take a stop either from Menlo Park or Redwood City, two places where there already are ridership imbalances that are growing every day. That will only increase in time. And so I guess the question then is, you know, this oftentimes, this actually presents us an opportunity to be a responsible member in this case. If we really care about rail, really care about getting cars off the road, we should really improve rail service by frankly getting out of the way and allowing the train service to be more efficient. The other small point I wanted to make was about the rail committee vote 4-3. So it's not in the report, it's not shown on YouTube because the YouTube only shows the top half of the room, but you know, there were 9 voting members present that night, and there were 7 people from the public speaking. So the vote to restore full service and also keep the station open represents only 4 out of 16 people in that room. It also only represents 4 of the 9 voting members that day. So I just want to give that perspective just from the numbers of what even happened and transpired that meeting with respect to the recommendation from the rail committee. And so I'm just going to respectfully request the council not to necessarily defer to the recommendation of the committee, but to review without deference. I guess in legal parlance, that's like de novo. So that's all.
Other public comments? Here, go ahead.
Caltrain's 2018 study indicated that Atherton Saturday boardings comprise only 0.4% of corridor-wide boardings. We have all of the liabilities of station noise and safety issues with few advantages because Caltrain's system cannot and will not be able to viably support small stations. If we truly value public transportation, we should negotiate to remove ourselves as an obstacle to a more efficient system by working with Caltrain to close the station in Atherton and to bring significant benefits to many families in Atherton. Perhaps we could negotiate, as part of the station closure, the right to use the station area and the iconic shelter in such a way that the new civic center could be enhanced for everyone visiting and working there and to preserve the station's history. Closing the station would eliminate the safety risk posed by the current dangerous configuration of Atherton's holdout station. Right now, people can wander onto the middle of the tracks, and this safety risk will increase as more people are drawn to the area by the new civic center and library. By having the station closed, Atherton could also preclude Caltrain from potentially having to exercise eminent domain over properties behind the station along McCormick Lane at Fair Oaks, something which may be required if Caltrain has to upgrade the current unsafe holdout station. Lastly, closing the station would result in immediate cessation of northbound train horn noise resulting from Caltrain's right to blare horns through their station platforms. This would significantly improve the quality of life without expenditure by Atherton for the many families from Walnut to Fair Oaks and from Virginia, McCormick, and Mount Vernon Lanes down to Redwood Way. Also, I found an article stating that the City of Auckland's electric trains were approximately 1/6 the noise level of the single-engine diesel locomotive trains. I want to emphasize this is noise from the train's operation, not their horns. Keeping the station open will undermine the amazing reduction in the train's operating noise, which could be achieved by electrification for the surrounding neighborhoods, the civic center, and library. Let's move forward by closing the station. Thank you.
Anybody else who hasn't made a comment on this would like to speak?
Hi, I'm John Malbetch, 90 Lloyden Drive. I live closer to the station than any of you. Let me start out by saying that I believe, in terms of a decision to be taken at this time, that the decision to close the station would be a profoundly bad idea. I encourage in the discussion to separate, to exclude consideration of SB 50. I think it's premature. in draft, it hasn't been debated, we don't know what it's gonna look like. I think the discussion should focus on what the town of Atherton would like to achieve in discussions with Caltrain about the future of the station. I think it's safe to assume that Caltrain would like to close the station for a variety of reasons, operational, financial, and so on. Well, why haven't they done it? I'm not sure, but I have dealt with public utilities through my electric power background, and public utilities have something called an obligation to serve. And I think for Caltrain as a public utility to turn their back on that obligation to serve, particularly for a town with a station right on the rail line, and a town that's been historically part of the Caltrain community for a century and more, that they may have some reluctance to do that. How much leverage that gives the town of Atherton, I don't know. But I don't think it's zero, particularly if that position is presented vigorously. Those of us who were involved in the negotiations, so-called, with Caltrain over the tall poles, and all of you that were involved in it, remember how Caltrain negotiates. And in that situation, they had basically nothing at stake. The increased costs and delays were nonsense. And they knew it, and we knew it. But we had no leverage, and we got nothing. If we close the station, we'll really have no leverage in this next negotiation, where they've got much more at stake, and hence are probably more likely to play hardball. So I think the appropriate decision now is to try and maintain as much leverage as we can in discussions with them. Thank you.
Okay, any others? Seeing none, then I'm gonna close public comments and bring it back to council. So Mike, would you like to make the opening comments with regards to this item?
Sure. First off, I heard a lot of very helpful comments from the public during that session. People are, obviously giving this a lot of thought, and it's obviously something the town cares about. My thoughts are, I agree that in many ways we are not pushed to make a decision today on this, but that there's some real potential benefits to closing the station, which in my view really focus on safer, quieter train service, or safer, quieter train flowing through the town, and actually increase service for the system. At the same time, we don't know exactly what the trade-offs are and what the options we have with Caltrain. So I think in my mind, the question is, this is worth form a subcommittee, go talk to Caltrain to see where we are, to see if we can develop some options. In my mind, the timing is good now for several reasons, which is we've got the Civic Center coming in now, and if we're going to make changes to that area, this is a good time to make them in a way that's consistent with the new Civic Center being built. It also coincides with electrification, which will give us a quieter train service flowing through the town. And if we take the right steps, we might dramatically reduce the noise that affects the entire town. By closing the station. Finally, with regard to SB 50, I agree that it's simply proposed legislation at this point. I think it's got an awful lot of support. A lot of very powerful forces are supporting it. But it is just legislation that's likely to be amended in some form or fashion. But I also think that when you pull back, there will be continuing pressure to develop near train
a quick comment then. We got the strategic plan, and it did say TBD. TBD, we don't know what TBD means. I think it's better to understand what they would like, and as was pointed out, that gives us leverage to identify potentially what we might like in return, understanding. For me, full service is full service, including a express train during rush hour, at least, you know, during the 2 rush hours. That's full service is full service, and that's what you're going to get. But you know, I don't have a hard feeling one way or the other, but I do I do feel strongly that we don't want to negotiate against ourselves. I agree with the comment that was made in the public comments that you know, we make a decision, then suddenly Caltrain says, okay, well, here's what we're going to go do. And we've still got issues with regards to potential parking around the Civic Center. We've got issues with quad gates, and there are several other items for the subcommittee to come up with. So I believe, similar to what Mike said, and on any subcommittee, what I'd like is subcommittees to brainstorm things, then review those with George. George can then, you know, circulate those, and then the council could provide any feedback, and then they have essentially the council view, and they can then go into negotiations as opposed to just doing it in a vacuum. So. So we'll have a subcommittee to negotiate this, not the SB 50 item. That's a different issue. But my view is that, similar to Mike's, that we shouldn't make a hard and fast decision right now. We need to better understand what Caltrain said, because TBD doesn't say anything, and we would lose whatever leverage we may have if we come in with them and say, yeah, we want you to do this. So that's my view. I really would like to hear anybody else's view. I spoke out because no one else spoke.
Right. I'll jump in because I'm not necessarily tongue-tied on this subject, and I will agree with pretty much what everybody was saying in the audience. There are a lot of variables, a lot of moving factors. I've been involved with the rail component for 7 years, and SB 50, in my opinion, related to this particular topic, as far as the station is concerned, is a separate issue. Some variable factor of SB 50 will come in our direction. It's something that, as a community, we're going to have to deal with, and the higher probability that we're going to have to deal with it with a station is just a tease factor to add into any legislation down the road. But as far as the base component of making a decision related to the station, it's based on the business plan component and how that business plan component influences the ridership component of our station. And if you believe in public transportation or want that factor, you know, is the warrant of us as a smaller community taking a stop along the corridor probably the best business plan? My guess would be no. But playing our cards in advance, as far as with Caltrain, we have a lot of things that we could sit down and have discussions with Caltrain. But part of negotiations is to not tell everybody everything in advance, because I think the general message probably in the beginning conversation is we want daily service 7 days a week, 12 times a day, et cetera, and work our way back from that position versus going in with our pants down and saying, hey, we're here, give us what you want. We've learned that lesson, unfortunately, as somebody mentioned in the audience, related to polls. But I think that the message is that we want to benefit the system itself as a community, and not to forget that we do have a station both north to south of us that a lot of our residents today actually use, and some of our residents are actually closer to another station than the station we actually have. So that is something that, to keep in mind. But there is also another underlying message here. We have been the first community here that has had a quiet zone component, and the factor of a station has impacted our ability to expand that. Well, also the expansion of that is also impacting our other jurisdictions that want to also consider a quiet zone. And the factor of no horn noises and electric trains is all a conversation about the reduction of our noise along the corridor, period. I mean, that is something that Caltrain has discussed, even in discussing or selling us the philosophy of electric trains. It's to reduce the external impacts along the corridor. And with the larger volume of trains, we cannot predict what Caltrain, nobody can predict what Caltrain will do tomorrow. But the concern of higher ridership is the fact if they can't deal with it on what we now know today as a 2-lane corridor with the passing track, doesn't mean it'll stay that way if ridership volumes increase based on other stations' needs, et cetera, et cetera. So there's also another variable factor that we really haven't even touched at all. So as far as my general consensus with today is, even though we have a recommendation coming out of the rail committee, I think that that recommendation is just to change what the current policy is, but I think that we can pause a moment, and I agree with the mayor's recommendation for an ad hoc component and keeping SB 50 or anything like SB 50 in a neighboring component with involvement with CCAG and maybe some other members of the council that can handle that component, or whoever he puts on the subcommittee, separate them, because I do believe that's a separate issue. And I know it's a very, it's an issue that has a lot of energy in this audience. The people here are not the only people that I've heard from. But I do think that it's something that there's a lot of history here, and giving up something prior to a negotiation doesn't make rational sense to me. But it's not that issue down the road, because I think that most of our residents do believe to better the transportation component along the corridor, so.
We're here for 2 reasons. One is to talk about the rail policy, which I'm prepared to do, and I'm prepared to make a motion related to it. And the other is to talk about the broader issue related to the train station. I think train service to the town of Atherton is an asset to the town. It's been with the town for almost 150 years. We have council members and mayors who've served on this council that have worked very hard to ensure our spot on this train track and to benefit our residents as a result of that. And times have, and I think that's an asset for us, and I think it's valuable to the town. But I also think that times have changed, and people don't commute principally to San Francisco from our community like they did 30 years and 100 years ago or 50 years ago. People go south much more for their commute today. I think that is the reason, and because of the reduced ridership, it's the reason that Caltrain was able to change our service from weekday service to weekend service. And I'm very aware that they've promised from the beginning of their strategy to implement electrification that they would return full weekday service to us. I also don't think that they intend to do that. I think that it is very clear in their 2020 business plan that they would like to terminate service to the Atherton station, and it only makes sense that it would save them 5 minutes in an extremely busy schedule that's only going to be increased in terms of how busy it is. So I have no doubt, although of course I could be wrong, but I have no doubt that they would like to terminate the service. I do think they feel an obligation to provide service, and particularly to provide it to a community that has benefited them as much as some of our prior council members have in helping to establish and fund the service that is Caltrain. So I don't think that we should choose to terminate the service because of the threat of Prop 50, which I do think is a unresolved matter. It's in the legislature, it is going to be amended, but on the other hand, it's very clear that housing is an enormous concern in this state, and that there is going to be increased pressure all over the state, including from the legislature, to increase density and provide housing around transit area centers. There's no question about it. I talked to Senator Wiener 2 weeks ago at a conference, and he told me, of course, his bill wouldn't apply to Atherton if Atherton had only weekend service. If Atherton had weekday service, it would apply. That was his opinion in his conversation with me. He wants to pass his bill. I think the pressure for housing is not going to subside, but I don't think that we should prejudge it because we don't yet have a bill. We don't know what it's actually going to say at the end of the day. So I'm happy to have that taken on by the existing subcommittee through CTAG and through the League of California Cities. I think that's the right place to address that legislation. And I think Atherton should support help for the housing crisis in California, and I don't think we should center ourselves on this issue at this time when we don't really know what the bill is. I do think that the issue of having a strong rail policy for the town is important, and I have a great deal of respect for what the Rail Committee has done for Atherton for many years, and particularly the strong leadership position that the Rail Committee took with regard to high-speed rail, which personally I think for the town of Atherton the issue is close to being dead. I think that it will be an issue in the Central Valley, but I don't think it will be an issue on the peninsula. That is my opinion. We have yet to see how this whole thing unfolds. But for the rail policy, I think the right thing for us to do is to establish a subcommittee and go talk to Caltrain. We've made our position known that we have wanted full-day service from the day that they reduced us to weekend service and promised that they'd return full service to us once they electrified. But we can see from the business plan they don't want to do that, so let's hear what they have to say to us, and let's go talk to them in that subcommittee and do it. For the points in the rail policy, I agree with some of these and I don't agree with others. Not that I am opposed to them, I just don't think they're central to what our rail policy should be. I think the most important bullet item for our rail policy is what is now item 6. It's that Caltrain must take all necessary steps to make rail transit through the rail corridor as safe as possible, including the maintenance of quad gates at Fair Oaks Lane and the establishment of quad gates at Watkins Avenue crossing. Now, I think that's the most important bullet point in the whole set of bullet points. I think we should make that the first bullet point because I think the order of bullet points when you establish a policy is important. And I think that our focus should be on safety. I think that the second most important bullet point is what is currently bullet point 4. Modernization of the rail system must minimize and fully mitigate any environmental impact to the town. I fully agree with that. With respect, and I'd make that bullet point number 2. With respect to what are currently the first and second bullet points, that Caltrain must restore full weekday service and Caltrain must complete a capital project to remove the holdout station in the town. You know, this goes to the center of the debate at the rail committee this past week, where the decision was 4-3 with 2 abstentions to support restore full day service. To me, that is a divided committee, and my preference would be that we just not address it. I'm not proposing that we terminate the rail service, but I am proposing that we go meet with them and hear what they have to say. So my suggestion on the rail policy would be to take out those first 2 bullet points and reorganize the other 2 as I suggested and not change any of the other language.
Thank you. So, as I said earlier, I met with Senator Wiener actually at the same conference that you and I were at, the Housing Forum with the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, and spoke with him after the conference. And he said, you know, if you only have weekend service, you know, he doesn't see that Atherton would fall under his requirements. However, then on Thursday night last week at CCAG, you know, to qualify, if we had weekday service, at what level would that threshold be to kind of tip the balance? We had one train a week or whatever, you know, on the weekday. So that needs to be defined. And we need to work with other cities and with the league and with CCAG, my other cities, to kind of craft some language, the proposed amendments to this bill, so that we understand so we feel comfortable that we're not going to put ourselves at risk. I think it's everyone agrees that we don't want to ruin Atherton's single-family home environment, and that to have a home, a 2-acre home along the rail corridor be purchased and a 4 or 5-story condominium be built along that, it doesn't make sense. And we are not a job search. We are not an economic hub of you know, businesses. I think Alex hit the nail on the head there. Absolutely not. So I think that we've got to work hand in hand. I agree with all my other fellow council members that the ad hoc committee needs to go and work with, make a presentation to Caltrain to find out what they're thinking, but we shouldn't give up what we've got right now. And I think we should be bold about what we might want to then negotiate with. Obviously, we've all read the business plan, and Caltrain's, they want to get rid of us. You know, they want to pretend that we're not here, but we are here, and we've been here. And I understand that the neighborhood is subjected to noise, the horns, and you know, our resident, we've done wonderful things to get a quiet zone, but because there's a station going northbound, they're allowed to blow the horn. So I just don't think we should give up anything right now. I agree with my colleagues. I think that the holdout station, if I could put that as a priority, if you're going to start reorienting things, I think that's a really big deal. And Burlingame and what was the other town? South San Francisco. Right. They were able to get the money from grants and develop it. You'd say no? They did.
South San Francisco is having an upgrade of their
Working
holdout
on
station.
it, yeah.
But Broadway and Burlingame, they are not. What will happen is their station at Broadway will be melded into eventually their grade separation.
Oh, well, okay. So they've got a plan. Okay. So I knew that it had been taken care of. But we need to figure this out. And we're not even talking about grade separations. What are we gonna do about that? So I thank you guys for all coming and talking and sharing your thoughts and your ideas and your feelings. It's just, I understand, your perspectives, and you're right. It is a really, really big decision, and we shouldn't make it lightly. And I think that we need to work really hard to do the best we can to get all the information. And I think by working in a subcommittee, we do that. Thank you, Mayor.
So, just to close, that most of the letters that we got had some mention of SB 50, and it was actually even written up in this. We will be having a study session on SB 50 to take, to understand what our position should be. I think we need to recognize that the affordable housing situation, for those of you who have children and things like that, the younger people can't afford to live here, can't afford to live anywhere, in many cases. I think that it's, to not use a pun, but it's a freight train that's coming, and it's gonna come. And if you've read some of the news articles about Newport Beach and all, we need to have a plan, and we need to flush that out. We need to discuss, as Elizabeth mentioned, we need to decide what we're going to do, what steps we can do that will help ease the housing, whether or not it's in our town or at one of the schools or helping a neighboring town do something. But it's important that we understand that we have goals that we need to achieve as well. So that will be a future item for those of you who came and spoke about that and wrote to us with regards to SB 50. We will be having a discussion on that, and we would love to hear your ideas on that and how possible solutions that you think might be of value. What we have today, I think we've come up with the discussion that we're not going to take a firm position per se. We're going to have the subcommittee put together their plans, so that's that. But there is then the final discussion on the rail policy, and so there was a discussion by both Rick and Elizabeth. I'll weigh in on that very briefly. My feeling is if there's going to be service, then the whole holdout station should be fixed. If there's not going to be service, then it's not a point. And so I don't know how you would like to proceed on this one, George.
What I heard was mayor to establish a subcommittee to meet with staff in Caltrain and flesh through some of the issues and ask them what they're interested in doing. Bifurcate that subcommittee and use the league and CCAG liaisons to work on the SB 50 legislation issue, maybe even draft some language to submit back up. With respect to the rail policy though, you could have the same Caltrain subcommittee work through the rail policy if you want, and then bring that back to the council.
Okay.
That's Mr. Mayor, my understanding was it was an ad hoc subcommittee.
Yeah,
which is
right.
important to distinguish.
Yeah, it's an ad hoc subcommittee, just two council members.
Appointed by the mayor.
Appointed by the mayor.
Not by the council.
Okay?
If that's the direction, I have enough direction to do that.
That's great.
Perfect.
Everybody okay?
Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
Okay.
So at this point, we're not adopting the rail committee's recommendations as written, as submitted. The ad hoc committee is going to take it under consideration and come back. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay.
I'm good with that as well.
Good.
Before we leave the topic, I just want to thank all the people who wrote us emails. I got more emails on this subject than we've gotten on any subject this year. Probably, well, including the burglary and probably including the Civic Center. And there were a lot of emails, dozens of emails on this subject. So thank you everyone for speaking and for everyone who submitted emails. It's really valuable to us.
Within 6 weeks.
I've got more on the burglaries.
You're the mayor.
Item 15, okay, George?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. One of the other issues that the rail committee has been following is Denver's construction and implementation of their new electric light rail system. One of the components of that is the constant warning time system that just hasn't been able to achieve what it's supposed to achieve. So the town rail committee reviewed the constant warning time system's concerns at their February meeting and is recommending that the council adopt the attached letter and send it off with the mayor's signature to Caltrain, expressing our concerns with respect to adopting a similar system that Denver Transit Partners has adopted. That concludes the staff report in brief. There might be a public to comment on this issue as well.
Mike, do you have any questions on this item?
No, I don't.
Okay. Any other council members have a question on it? Nope. Any public comments with regards to the proposed warning time system and the letter that is being recommended that I sign and we send in on behalf of the town? So, Paul?
Yes, thank you. The rail committee in general, and Marissa Dexter here in particular, has been following the situation in Denver very closely for a long time. And she has an informant from Denver that gives her privileged information which we cannot discuss. But there is a serious problem here that Caltrain has gone ahead and hired Balfour Beatty as their lead on the electrification. And Balfour Beatty is one of the Denver Transit Partners that design, build, and will operate their transit system. And they have been under the gun for violations of the constant warning time system since it started. They had a flagman at each of 10 rail crossings for 2.5 years because they couldn't make the gates stayed down too long, and people were running around them and doing all sorts of other things. They got a letter in November from the FRA saying that their gates were still in violation, even though they'd allowed a variance from the strict regulation. And the partners sent back a legal brief that said everything we have done is according to our plans and it's just right, we do not have a problem. So there they have a problem. I don't know how the FRA is going to react to this, but it's not going to go away. And many persons, including myself, have tried to bring the Joint Powers Board up to date on this, and the general reaction is they don't even say thank you for your comment anymore. So I think a political statement from the town might be more effective, and they should be alarmed because they have a similar problem. It's a little different because in Denver they have a freight track alongside 2 electric commuter tracks, and the grade crossing includes all 3. So they've got a mix and match there. But Caltrain has freight and electric, diesel freight and electric going on the same track, which is a different problem, but it's also a very serious problem, and they do not have a solution yet. So I think the caution is very much in order.
Marissa?
I apologize, I need to correct the record here. I have no contact in Denver who has provided me with any information. On the contrary, where I have received my information is literally good old-fashioned detective work. I have literally had to watch meetings at the Denver Regional Transportation District's YouTube videos and to follow this. And I have spent countless hours researching this issue. It is very complex. Right, to let you know where it stands right now, the Federal Railroad Administration submitted a few months ago, November 15th, they submitted a letter to the Regional Transportation District of Denver saying you have 30 days to submit a plan whereby you're going to be able to solve all of the problems that remain within a 1-year period. And as Paul had mentioned accurately, originally the private consortium that designed, built, operates, and maintains this system said, the system's operating exactly as we have designed it. There's no reason to respond. But however, when a congressional and senatorial delegation became involved, then the Regional Transportation District of Denver, along with the private consortium, did respond within the 30-day period. They have put together a plan which they say is going to provide a solution within 1 year. Let me say two important things. The major problems that are recalcitrant that they mention is they have difficulty in controlling gate downtime. There's extended gate downtimes when you have a station right next to a rail grade crossing, just as we would have here. And the second problem is that gates downtime is very extended when you have very close station stops. These are the problems which seem recalcitrant. The other ones seem as if they can be resolved. I fear, though, we do not have sufficient information on their structure. They have a very complicated structure. They have a consortium of contractors, then they have subcontractors and sub-subcontractors. It is unclear who exactly has responsibility for that, and I have a hesitation in that. I do not want to be poking Caltrain in the eye because we really do not have sufficient information, and I'm not sure that we will get anything worthwhile back. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Roland Lebrun. I'm from San Jose. I'm stopping by on my way back from the Caltrain CAC. I've been following this situation for about 8 years now. If you look at the Caltrain engineering standards that were written over 10 years ago, it tells you in black and white that constant wait time will no longer work once they electrify. So my initial approach was when the C-bus specification came out, I said, this is clearly a signaling issue. Why don't you incorporate that feature into C-bus, since we're completely going to redo the signaling and make the line electrification ready? Basically, you build a foundation. Because the situation that you've got right now, as things stand, the day that you turn the power on these new lines, the gates are just going to start going crazy, okay? And if nobody does anything about it, people are going to get killed. It's that simple. So I made two subsequent proposals to the JPAB. The first one is that I told them, look, it really doesn't matter whatever solution anybody comes up with, but you need an independent authority to advise you. And what I recommended is the Transportation Test Center, TTCI Incorporated, I believe it's in Colorado, that basically does all the testing for the FRA. So I said, they come up with a solution, take it up there, let TTCI test it, write your report, and say, yeah, you good, or you got problems. No follow-up on that, and I'm going to go further with this, obviously. The other recommendation I made is a letter I wrote last year when we started the discussion with insulated rail joints and everything. I don't want to get into that, that gets technical. But what I pointed out to them, 1 minute, okay, is that Siemens had acquired a British company called, I believe it's Invensys. And Invensys had the technology to make constant wait time work with electrified tracks. And I asked them, why don't you reach out, you know you're not going to get anywhere with Balfour Beatty. Why don't you reach out to Siemens and see what they got to offer, and if Siemens has got a solution, take the solution to TTCI and have it tested. And basically, none of that's happening. There's no discussion. They're telling us they have a solution down in San Jose at Ozure. Well, I got news for you. I live down there, okay? And the trains at Ozure always go to the gates at 30 miles an hour. So, you know, Ozure and constant wait time is basically an oxymoron. So that's the current state of the situation, and please take it up from there. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other public comments on this item? Okay, bring it back to council. Mike, would you like to make a comment on this one?
I don't have a lot to add on this one. I'm comfortable with the letter that was already sending, and I appreciate the work everybody put in on this. All of it, so.
Great.
Yeah, I guess I really have a question, which is, I don't really understand why this is our issue. I mean, I followed the comments on the situation in Denver, which sounds horrendous. I really don't want to see that situation happen here. But I honestly don't see why we need to get involved in this issue as the town of Atherton. And I frankly think it's kind of confrontational to Caltrain, and we're gonna wanna meet with Caltrain and try to work out some arrangement with them where we're emphasizing safety and they're gonna support quad gates at Watkins, which I think is really important to our community. Because if we can, if we improve safety, it benefits our community at every single step. And B, if we can get quad gates at Watkins, we can then pursue a quiet zone at Watkins, which is a huge quality of life benefit to our community. My preference is not to get involved with this issue.
Well, I read this and obviously I'm alarmed that this could potentially happen in our corridor, that this public utility entity, the Caltrains and the electrification, that they're gonna install something that is gonna put our residents in jeopardy. I guess I think it's, I'm a little going with what Rick was saying, but when I was reading the letter, there's a lot of words in it, and we're kind of making a lot of statements and assumptions about things that may or may not be really accurate. I think if we could boil the letter down to that certain things have come to our attention, our awareness, and we want to let you, Mr. Harnett, as the Executive Director of Caltrain, know that we feel alarmed about the potential that this might be implemented in our electrification project, and we want to let you know that, well, we have concerns, and we hope that you will take this under consideration and reassure us and be diligent and careful to make, you know, in your job as an executive director, to not let that happen, to not let this happen, to do everything you can. But I would rewrite the letter, and I know you took a long time to write it, and it's really, I guess, well done, but I feel that it's kind of, there's too many words in it, and it makes a lot of statements and assumptions that could kind of muddy the water and be confrontational. I would like to just be a little bit more open-handed. Gosh, you know, Chicken Little is saying the sky's falling here, and I don't want it to fall on our town. And I just want to let you know that we've been made aware of it, and so we're putting you on notice that we need to really be vigilant about it. That's my recommendation.
Yes, you know, this is obviously, you know, something that, you know, has been brought up related to, this is the second time around there's been a warning time system. The CBOS system was an absolute failure, and so the hire of Balfour Beatty is the secondary component. So they've already failed once, and this is the second attempt at, and we're saying at this point, an attempt at creating a safer corridor. I think because it really hasn't been brought up, you know, locally at all, that it's important to let Caltrain know in a soft method, and I think that the language in this is relatively soft, bringing it to your attention. If you did not do your due diligence, I think that's kind of what that pretty much implies, before you hired them, we want to let you know. So as Elizabeth just mentioned, it's as if we're giving them notification that we're aware that this is going on, now that we're giving you notification of it, making it part of the record. If nobody else has told you, please make sure, you know, that you keep this corridor safe and keep an eye on your contractor, et cetera, et cetera. I don't feel personally that maybe shortening the letter, you know, we do have a tendency of being a little wordy, shorter and sweet, but I didn't get the feeling that this was a confrontational. It was more of just to giving them to be informed and to create a public record. I think is important, since this really hasn't been brought up, and I don't think there's one article that I've seen related to this, and they're hiring this contractor in this county, even though this is Denver, but now they're here. So I think that we create the first sense, in essence, in my opinion, of a public record related to who they've hired. So now if you didn't do your due diligence, which we hope you did, that now, you know, we're giving you notice to the effect that the town's aware of it. So, and the rest of the county, because we hope somebody else picks this up.
You said in this county, but it's not just this county.
This county in Santa Clara County,
It's
yeah.
got, right?
It's the whole board. Yeah.
So my 2 cents on it is, first off, I think we don't want to be overly harsh with the letter. I think that, now they can read any letter, as nice as we make it, that says, hey, we warned you and you're negligent if you don't do anything about it, okay? So we want to make sure that something like that is, you know, covered, but at the same time, we just say, you know, we've been following this, and we've seen that there's been some concerns, and that we want to make sure that we want our crossings to be as safe as possible, as I'm sure you do, and so we'd like to bring these to your attention. And it does say at the end, we're bringing it to your attention so that you can be proactive in managing, you know, maybe just in delivering this functional system as opposed to managing your contractor and stuff like that. So I think we should send the letter, but I think it should be, as somebody else has said, essentially, it can't be confrontational, but it should go on to record that they really need to do something, and if they don't, they're really being somewhat negligent in their duties here to protect everybody. And that's what we're really interested in, safety. And that goes back to the comments that Rick had made with regards to what is our primary focus for the rail committee, and it's getting to the point now where it's, you know, we want to make rail traffic through our town as absolute safe as possible. You know, we can't have any more accidents. We don't want to see them in our neighbors' areas, but we don't want to see them here as well. So that would be my recommendation.
Question
Yeah.
for Karen, Councilman Wiest,
Please.
if I may.
Please.
So the CalMod committee group that you are on, would they send a letter like this? I mean, is this something that has been discussed at that level? Because that group is,
Surprising enough, as far as the CBOS system, the failure of the CBOS system and bringing Balfour Beatty, it was really, you know, kind of a unilateral, we're bringing in a new contractor. The comments related to bring the Denver issue, the rail committee and Narissa tripped upon this in evaluating them after the fact. So realistically, at CalMod, that pretty much was not really brought up at all.
they're not aware of it.
At least nobody's brought it up, that effect. So, I mean, this shit, once they hired the contractor.
Well, I mean, I kind of just want to acknowledge Councilmember DeGoya's position is, you know, why are we taking the lead role? I mean, because in something like this, I mean, as any other town, Burlingame, San Mateo, Rapid City.
Well, I would think that we've got a very active rail committee and a very involved corridor committee, probably more than any other jurisdiction. So I think that our overall involvement, the expectation of anything coming up would probably come up from us first. So I would say that the hiring of what contractor and then the research related to it, because this is still ongoing. This is still not solved.
Can I just make a
In
technical correction of fact? Okay. I'm very concerned about sending this letter. I'm not in favor of sending it, and I'll tell you why. And it gets to the issue we're discussing right now. We do not know who is responsible, who in particular is responsible for the fiasco of the constant warning time system. As I said, in Denver, there is a web of interrelated companies. It's a very complex structure, and I have spent weeks trying to break it down, and I've had to go to Federal Railroad Administration docket documents to find out. It's not simple. It's not just Balfour Beatty. Now, Balfour Beatty has been Caltrain's design-build contractor since day one. When they wrote off CBOS, they bought an off-the-shelf product from a company called Wabtec. Now, Wabtec owns a company that developed the constant warning time system in Denver, Zorail Wabtec. So it is a complex web of interactions, and what I'm saying is we don't know who did what to whom. And I have reservations about sending a letter because we may be pointing fingers at someone when we don't know who's actually responsible. And I feel it could be confrontational. Caltrain is clearly aware of these problems. They were made aware of it at least 2 Joint Powers Board meetings, to the JP Board themselves. And Caltrain is aware of this because Balfour Beatty is part of a lawsuit in Denver for $80 million against the Regional Transportation District of Denver. They're aware of it. I just, personally, this is just my own personal opinion. I'm not representing the Rail Committee here. My personal opinion is it would be a mistake to stick Caltrain in the eye when we don't know who is responsible. That is my own personal opinion.
But the Rail,
Thank you.
The staff report says the Rail Committee is recommending this, so I assume, did the Rail Committee look at this and vote on it?
The Rail Committee voted on it at the last meeting.
Okay.
May I speak?
Super. He's been waiting at me. I know he likes me.
Let's go.
I think it's a real mistake to send this letter to Caltrains for a number of reasons. Let's say I'm the CEO and the top guy there, and I don't know about the thing going on in Denver. I don't know that my technical group hasn't solved the problem. When people were here, we met with them. I talked to a gentleman and I said, what about this problem in Denver? He said, yes, we've raised that to our senior management. And they said it'll be fixed by the time that we need it. So what they're going to hear is, here's Atherton, you're thinking they're going to give us some information about our company who's responsible for safety. It would never do any of the things that you're implying. So I think it's going to be taken as a negative message from Atherton, which we get nothing for, nothing. Thank you.
So, I think we have an obligation to say we have a concern to somebody. I don't know if it's, you send it to the executive director, or you send it to a committee that's managing it, or you send it to the program manager, and just say, you know, we've got these concerns. I think we're irresponsible if we just ignore it. That's my 2 cents. I don't know, Carrie, what would you?
Yeah, you know, I think it should, maybe the real gist here is really to just make a record of it and shrinking it from, in essence, a full 1.5 pages to, you know, maybe simplifying it to half that, getting rid of a lot of the, if I might say, and more of bringing it to your attention. And I guess the fact of the matter is that we've mentioned Balfour Beatty in here, but maybe it's really informing them as well, and subcontractors thereof. But it's just informing them of the Denver issue that we've been made aware, and we want to make them aware of it.
Could we invite them, George and Bill, could we invite Caltrain down to go to a rail committee meeting where the project manager or somebody could then, they would present what they're doing and we would be able to provide input on an informal basis? Is that possible?
Yes.
So we could change the letter and say, hey, you know, we've got some, we've heard a lot about what's going on in Denver, and we would like you to, can somebody come down and meet with our rail committee who are our experts and talk to us about this, and we would like to invite you and hear some dates, and we would like to mutually agree a date. That way, we've raised the issue, and that way somebody will come and talk to us, and we can raise whatever things we would like to raise. I mean, is that a decent way to go forward without poking anybody? We don't want to poke the bear, right?
Well, so I'm fine to invite Caltrain to come to a rail committee. I would rather not send a letter. I don't think there's any value in it. A letter that says that if you do this, people may attempt to cross the tracks at inappropriate times at significant risk to themselves. Yeah, but I think this, I think it's a nasty letter. That's what I think. I'm not gonna vote for it if we're gonna send a letter. I'm totally opposed to it. Not principally, wait, let me finish. Not principally for the reasons that were said, because I don't have the information, but it makes a bunch of assumptions about things going on in Denver that we don't have familiarity with. And I think that if there are, there's no question our rail committee is more knowledgeable than any other rail committee on the peninsula. And I think it's appropriate to invite someone from Caltrain to come down and meet with the rail committee at the next meeting and to talk about it. I'd just as soon do that and leave it there. If we're going to send a letter, I'd much rather send a letter to the CalMod group. But frankly, I think Caltrain knows about this issue. We don't need to inform them about it. So I just don't think it's our place.
I was gonna agree with you, Rick, and I was gonna say that, and I'm gonna tell you why. Maybe a letter after the rail committee actually gets a full detailed Caltrain, sit down and talking about this subject as their point of topic with the rail committee, because they haven't done that. And if the rail committee would still make a recommendation at that point, then I think that, because I don't think there's an urgency to this per se. It doesn't have to be done this week, and at the next rail committee, ensure that we can get Caltrain there.
So why don't we just invite the rail committee or the town to issue a request that somebody come down and talk to us about this, that we're interested in it, and give them some dates and see what we can do. And then from there, we'll get another recommendation based on that feedback. Okay, why don't we just do that?
So this is going to be very brief, and I entirely agree with the way that you're approaching this. The only thing I want to bring to your attention, I've not got the quote itself, okay? So it's Caltrain, Engineering Standards, and Chapter 7 talks about grade crossings. What I'm going to read to you is the last sentence in Section 3.1. And it says, design for Caltrain's electrification project will require a program to replace present constant warning time systems, since these devices will not work in a traction power system. And that's it right there in black and white. And what I would do is go to Caltrain. Could you please come and talk to us about what this means and what you did about it?
The rail committee can bring that up, but okay, so let's go ahead and let's close the discussion on this item. I think we've decided what we're doing. Do we have enough information? Okay, and so we'll move on, and as we move on, public comments when they're closed, and you get to talk once, okay? So think about what you want to say at that time, okay? And this is not just for this meeting, but moving forward, because this is not a free-for-all, okay? Okay, so let's move on, and we are on number 16.
Mayor, I'll take that one.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening. Staff is recommending that the City Council approve the Middlefield Road Class 2 bicycle lanes improvement plans and specifications and authorize advertisement for public bids. And as noted in your staff report, there's been much public outreach over the last year and a half with public meetings, as well as Transportation Committee meetings and VPAC meetings, and then 2 meetings at Council to help with the design. And everything that's Council has directed staff and the consultant team to put into the design package is here. And so we're ready to go out to bid. We have contacted all the schools in the district too to make sure that our plan is to do this project during the summer recess during the schools to minimize impacts to the schools. And also, as noted in your staff report, last June or July, PG&E contacted the town about they were going to replace the gas main on Middlefield, and that's coming. In fact, we just got word today they're going to start on that on March 8th, so in about 2 weeks, starting around Jennings Lane over there, and work their way south. And that could be about a 10 to 12 month project for that. So our contractor, whoever that, when we go out to bid and come back to award to City Council on March 20th, will be working closely with the contractor with PG&E to make sure that everything's coordinated. And as again noted in your staff report, PG&E has agreed through negotiations to pay for a lot of the slurry seal and striping, which we estimate about $360,000 worth. And the rest would be coming out of our CIP project that council has established for this. So we're ready to go. We just need approval from council to advertise a public bid and approve the project. So I'd be happy to answer questions.
Any questions, Mike?
No questions.
Rick?
Yeah, I've got a question. So, Marty, under the finding, some of my questions have to do with the cost. And under the findings and analysis, it says, with a cooperation with PG&E, town construction costs are substantially reduced, and the $251,000 from the federal TDA grant funds will no longer be needed. And then in the fiscal impact that goes through, that we have the $733,000 from Measure A, and we have the $360,000 from PG&E, and then it says implementation of the bike lane plans is expected to cost $640,000, including construction.
Right.
It wasn't clear to me, is that $640,000 in addition to the $733 and the $360 from PG&E?
No, that's total. 640. Do you, Robert maybe can answer that.
The expected cost is $645,000, but we have more than enough with the grant, $733,000 for the project. And then we also have other funds.
In 360 at 645 from PG&E.
Right.
So.
And in fact, there's some additional funding as a result of this PG&E
Right.
component that we're going to be able to allocate, not our funding, but grant funding, allocate to another road project.
Right.
Right.
So there's no out-of-pocket cost to the town at all?
There's some.
There's some for design that we've done with Mark Thomas, that
Right.
we've had that out-of-pocket cost. But George is correct that the grant that was going to use for that, the $251,000, we're going to use for future projects.
And we wouldn't be able to use the federal FTDA funds for the design?
No.
No, they weren't eligible for design, Councilman.
The PG&E helps us a lot.
Oh,
Yeah, I got it.
That works for us.
It's just, I was just confused by the language. So
The
that's
grants are
fine.
mostly for
You
construction,
answered my
not the design parts. So.
Got it.
Any other questions? Okay, any public comments on the Middlefield Bike Lane project? Seeing none, we'll.
I just had a question for Marty. What date did you say PG&E is gonna start the gas thing?
March 8th.
March 8th, thank you.
That's what we just found out today.
Thank you.
Obviously, they're not concerned about school recess.
They got other issues to be concerned about.
Yeah.
So my comment is, I'm really happy that we got these grant funds, because Atherton typically is passed over. And thank you all for writing for the grant funds and applying for it and being ready. I really, really thank you very much.
Well, this Nadia Bozeman, who's on the staff report, she's like a wizard at that stuff from Interwest. She does such a great job with that stuff.
Well, buy her a latte every other day. And
I'll let her know that. Yeah.
Honestly,
Yeah.
it really makes a big difference. Thank you.
So we didn't officially close public comments, but we're now closing. Any other comments on this?
No, just echoing Melissa's.
Do you need a resolution?
I'll make a motion to approve. I'd like to make a motion.
Second.
It's roll call.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Lindberg?
Aye.
Councilmember Lewis?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Glia? Mayor Whitman?
Aye. Okay, Next is item 17, and I think we have to put the phone on mute for this, which is Civic Center discussion.
I think I have to hang up, wouldn't I, or would maybe we move to the end, and I could just bring straightforward through the everything else, but.
As long as he doesn't talk, it's kind of irrelevant. He's not in the room, he's not doing anything. He's not supposed to influence the vote at all, but you can't see his facial gestures or hear him huff on the phone.
So we're putting you on mute. We'll tell you when you're allowed to be back on. All right? Okay.
So Mayor, this is mine again. This is a Civic Center update. In this, we're asking council to authorize the city attorney to prepare and the city manager to execute a lease agreement with Mobile Modular Management Corporation for the relocation of administration, finance, and building planning staff during construction of the Civic Center project. And really what this is to put 6 trailers, mobile trailers, into Holbrook Palmer Park for the duration of the project, which right now we're estimating about 20 months for that. And Mobile Modular is the same company that we have used for the library, Mobile Modular's over there. And we're just asking for authority to move forward with that. And also part of the contingency that you have in the staff report is for PG&E issues, hookup issues, utility, IT, moving stuff. So that $55,000 will be used for that. The remainder is for the Mobile Modular lease agreement over the next 20 months or so while the Civic Center project is under construction. And again, as noted in your staff report, the construction bids are due next Wednesday, so a week from today. And then the goal is to bring on March 6th, in your special meeting that day, a recommendation to award. And then we hope to issue a notice to proceed to the contractor on April 24th of 2019. And so with the Mobile Modular, I've been working with them for quite some time now for the library now with this project. There's a lot of design and work that they need to do to get all this equipment, all these trailers ready. And so they need 60 days working days lead time. And so the timing is critical that we keep moving forward with this. But I know we're going to wait until next Wednesday to ultimately see what kind of bids come in. Because if there are bids like last time, council might not want to do that. But so we're going to wait and make the.
I'm not signing until.
Yeah, until we know we got good bids, we're not going to be moving forward. But we just want a council authority so that if we do get the good bids, we can move forward. Because the timing is very of essence here. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, Marty?
I have a question.
Sure.
So I count maybe 14 parking spaces that are going to be, have you counted up how many parking spaces are we?
I have not, we have not.
There's about 14 on one side, the back side where they'll be closer to the Gilmore House.
Yeah.
And the ones in the front, the same 14 spaces, they'll have to be changed to either parallel or diagonal parking. They'll be hard to access, and we might actually need to make some changes to the median island.
Right.
In some way. But yes, we'll lose about 28 spaces in total.
28, you think?
Right.
But you've created, you've got a plan to add those back.
But we got a plan for circulation and a plan for probably 7 spaces to add back out of that 28. But if you remember with the Easter egg,
right.
We do those temporary spaces along the front of the trees.
On the exit.
On the exit, we may be striping those in more on a permanent basis for that period of time.
And so that would kind of
yes.
Mitigate the loss.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's something that, okay. All right.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got 2 questions. One question is, we've kind of modeled this in 2 different units, right? One, I guess, for planning and building, and the other for admin and finance. And the costs are $82,539 for one, and 2 is double that. And I just wonder if you do 2 of them, they don't give you a discount if you're doing 2. We've just doubled the one cost.
Right now, because we're really at the conceptual planning level stage, and once council, if you approve this tonight, and the city manager executes this lease agreement next week, and we're moving forward. That's when we're going to start getting into more of a detail, and then we're going to be refining all this. And I talked to the mobile modular rep actually yesterday, and he's come up with some ideas that can maybe save us a lot of money, up to maybe $50,000, by using existing trailers that they have and just doing some minor modifications instead of doing wholesale changes. But so this is really work in progress. All this.
So, great, that's really, I mean, that'd be great.
Right.
Because it seems expensive.
Right.
So, my second question is, it includes a 20% contingency. We normally have a 10% contingency.
The reason is, as Marty mentioned, we haven't yet worked through the detail of the electricity, the IT connections, and all those other things that are part of this move over to these two temporary buildings. That's what that would pay for.
And with the
So
library.
This is essentially informative. We don't have to make a.
You're giving me authorization to sign a deal. It's probably going to be less than this amount, given Marty's recent phone call with Modular. But we don't yet know what.
There's water hookups. There's a lot of utilities.
Okay. So my last question is, have you looked at rental space and compared it?
Outside of town?
Yeah. So I just did a search on Safari on Google, and at Bohannon, just past the post office, there's 25,000 square feet for about the same price we're going to pay over the same period of time. It's, I mean, there's some inconvenience, there's some issues. I'm not saying that should be done, and if we can get a 50% or $50,000 discount, that changes the economics. But have you looked at that?
We haven't looked outside of town.
No.
Because
We looked at the main
it has
houses.
a huge impact on the park,
Right.
obviously.
Right.
Taking out 28 parking spaces, and
They're putting it back.
well, they're not going to put back 28 parking spaces.
There's
I don't remember how many goes in there for the Easter egg hunt, but there's
quite a
several.
number.
Quite a few will come back.
The bigger
I have
issue
questions.
is the use
That
of
question?
that space and community events right next to that are rented in the park.
Marty, there are a couple things that are planned for the park, and there's a regular standing meeting at the park on Sundays that actually uses every parking place. So have we notified those people that they should consider moving, or that they will not be able to?
Well, I know we've been working with Julie, I forget her last name.
We're catering by day, we
Yeah.
advise catering by
That
day.
includes the Sunday guys, right?
Yeah.
That includes the Sunday guys.
Right.
All right, great. No problem. Are there any public comments on this? Seeing none, we're gonna close public comments, back to final comments, and then a suggestion to move forward.
I move that we go ahead and move forward with an action as directed by the city manager. Looks like our action item is going to be city council action is necessary to authorize.
City manager.
Yeah, up to.
Up to 271 plus the contingency.
271 plus the contingency.
Is there a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. We have the roll call vote.
Councilmember Lepers?
He's not voting.
Councilmember Lewis?
Aye.
Councilmember Weeks?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Goliath? Mayor Woodburn?
Aye.
Mike, you're back.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, welcome back, my friend, to this show that never ends. Yeah, well, and you have four of us, we move pretty quick.
Oh, that was not nice.
Okay, we're now on item number 18, which is the mid-year budget. I hear you have a 50-page presentation.
I do. In the interest of time, I'll save that for another day. For this item, it's the receive and file of the mid-year budget review for the general fund for fiscal year 18-19, and adopt the attached resolution authorizing a budget amendment for necessary adjustments. Budget continues to be a healthy outlook on finances for us for the 18-19, there are 2 areas that are necessitate adjustments and require council level approval and adjustments. These total $9,000 across the departments of administration and public works. The general fund revenues are expected to see projections by 1.4 million. Basic revenue increases in the general fund are 737,000 plus ERAF increase of 666,000. In summary, revenues inclusive of ERAF are projected at 18.1 million. This provides a net positive change in the fund balance of 4,091,000 at the end of the year, and an anticipated end of year fund balance of 21 million, and this is inclusive of mandatory reserves. So in conclusion, the fiscal year 18-19 projected unallocated fund balance is 15.5 million. You have the staff report, and all that is required is just the adoption of $9,000 in budget adjustments for the 18-19 budget. That concludes my report. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Mike, do you have any questions on the mid-year budget?
No questions. No questions. Time comes, I'll have a compliment or two to get up, but no questions.
Any other questions?
Sorry. Okay. In the resolution, it talks about increase in custodial account services for park and facility maintenance departments. Do we have a custodial service yet?
We're terminating, we sent the letter out to terminate existing services. And then once that terminates, we have a month-to-month agreement with another company.
Okay, but we are getting custodial services?
Yes.
All right. I'm good.
Rick?
Are we adopting the budget now, or how much?
Mid-year resolution.
Yeah.
Just these 2 items here.
Right.
Okay. Then I just have one question, which is under the, on page 4 of the staff report, where it compares the budget projected change, anticipated revenue, and then the percentage change.
Yes.
The projected change for police revenue and for miscellaneous revenue are about 100% of what we had, 200% of what we had budgeted.
Correct.
Why is that?
The reason, on one for the police revenue, there's, as you're aware, the police department has been working with local school districts on that SRO reimbursement. So we projected to get 90,000 for that, so that was a big part of that increase.
Okay.
And then on the miscellaneous revenue, there's construction time limit deposits that we are going to realize this year, and it's about 269,000. So that's why those went up. We anticipate those at the beginning of the budget year.
That's good.
Thank you.
Gary? Okay, any public comments on the mid-year budget? Seeing none, we'll close public comments, final comments, and
Motion to approve.
Second.
Councilmember Lindquist?
Aye.
Councilmember Lewis?
Aye.
Councilmember Weiss?
Aye.
Vice Mayor DeLeo?
Aye.
Mayor Whitmer?
Aye. Okay.
Nice going, Robert.
Thank you.
Love when your numbers were.
I love your presentation. It's
Yeah, I love it when it's short. Short presentation, I get it.
This is one of your best ones ever, really.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, it was a lot better than you did in the finance. Oh, it was good.
Well, that's my show.
That was good,
so
thank
that's
you,
why.
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Good
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
19 is to discuss the use of Rule 20A undergrounding utility work credits and consider the option of selling the accumulated work credits or provide staff with other types of direction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You have the written report before you. We have Rule 20A funds that are collected by and through PG&E. They can only be used on main thoroughfares, so in Atherton that would be Fair Oaks, Atherton, Middlefield, Alameda, Dallas, Polis, Valparaiso would be our primary thoroughfares through town. There are some other areas that might qualify, but it's subject to PG&E conversation. El Camino's not one of them, it's not our street, so it wouldn't apply. But the cost to underground is about $1,000 to $2,000 per linear foot. So we have about $1.4 million. We accrue about $25,000 a year. So to come up with enough funding to do the town's required portion of an underground district would take a considerable amount of time unless we either bought Rule 20A funds from other communities or the residents, paid for the town's portion, which is a possibility as well. So staff was investigating what to do with our Rule 20A funds, and one of the options that we brought up to the council before as information was we can swap our Rule 20A funds with another community that might be doing an underground utility district. It's usually 40, 50, 60 cents on the dollar, depending on what the current market is for that, and we get unrestricted general fund money in return. You received a letter from a resident who said, hey, maybe we should consider keeping our Rule 20A funds in the hopes of doing a district at some point in the future when we have general fund money to actually buy them from another community. It might make sense to do that and get the same dollar share back. So we're bringing it to the council for what you want to do with them. You could set a minimum price that you consider swapping them for, and if we don't get that, hold on to them. We could just bring you back with whatever the deal might be, and you can make a decision at that point. We're just looking for some feedback and direction.
Any questions on the staff report?
I do have a question.
Okay.
But my question is that it's really striking. Where did that number come from, and how solid is that number? It's a very high number.
It's very solid. It's based on recent PG&E projects for underground utility districts. And getting into a PG&E project, an underground utility project, is a 3 to 4 year queue. You have to inform PG&E, inform the district, do an engineering report, all those sorts of things that we talked about the other day about the drainage district, informing those sorts of districts. It's very similar to that. So the queue of that $1,000 to $2,000 per linear foot is probably about, it's pretty recent in terms of their projects.
And one other question, if we decided we want to swap these funds out, about how long would it take until we actually have funds in our general fund?
30, 60 days.
Oh, pretty quick. Okay, thank you.
Elizabeth? Go ahead.
Well, the thought of undergrounding our overhead wires, electrical wires, is so appealing to me throughout our town. Because of the recent storms and our beautiful trees that keep crashing down, and we've just been experiencing down trees, down wires, treacherous situations. We do have a neighborhood in town. I think Lindenwood is pretty much all underground. The whole town of Palo Alto is all underground. I mean, and it's just beautiful. I came and spoke in front of this council when I first kind of moved into Hamilton. Along Emily, there's a short street that my house is on, and it has overhead wires all over it, and all these kids run, it's, up and down. It's a pedestrian, it's a safety issue, I think. You say it could only be for Atherton Avenue or Middlefield Road or Big.
Rule 20A funds. You can underground.
No, but I
anywhere
came
in town.
to try to get the Rule 28 funds. I wasn't on council at the time.
Yeah.
So I knew that it was very expensive. But the 1.4 million is really just a little drop in the bucket, obviously. And even if, can we borrow ahead? Can we, say we're gonna do Atherton Avenue and we'll pay you back over 60 years or something, with that regular, money that's coming in. But that's probably not.
We're only allowed to borrow 5 years ahead.
Only 5 years ahead, okay. So that wouldn't do it. So the attractive nature of discounting this money, it doesn't seem to be really doable for us. Did I ask a question?
You did, you said, can we
Somewhere in there.
apply it to Emily, and that was the answer, so are you making
Well,
another question?
No, I'm making a comment.
Okay,
I'm
well,
stopping, I
comments will
stopped
be-
myself.
The comments will be next. I was gonna ask you if there was another question in there, but that's okay.
It just kind of
Yeah.
flows in.
Yeah,
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Could we use the funds, well, I guess the first question is, with respect to the Civic Center, is the plan to underground all the wires as part of the project?
Yes, I don't think there are any poles that are actually within the Civic Center parcel that are not already underground.
Really? So there would be no benefit to the use of these funds for the Civic Center?
Right, we looked at that about.
Even, what about along Fair Oaks?
Along Fair Oaks, we could establish an underground utility district, but even at our current amount, it would exceed that.
Wait, along the frontage of Fair Oaks from the train tracks to the next property, west of the Civic Center, that.
Right, PG&E will establish what the boundaries for their energy requirements are. I mean, we may say, okay, there's 2 poles, but they may say, oh no, you gotta do 6 poles or 8 poles in order to complete their circuit, which would exceed our 1.4 million.
But we haven't asked them what.
No, we looked at it a little bit with respect to the poles along Caltrain's corridor. We were talking about applying and creating a special underground district as a part of their pole height issue when they were talking about to underground those poles.
Right.
And that would have exhausted the entirety of our Rule 28 funds plus some general fund money required.
But my question is really, well, first, I don't know off the top of my head if we've got aerial wires running along Fair Oaks in front of what will be the Civic Center building, and in fact, the entry to the Civic Center building. And looks like we do, you're nodding. So then second, if we haven't asked PG&E, I think we ought to ask PG&E if we could get lined underground, some portion.
Right, and that's kind of.
And if it's not all up in front of the Civic Center, it makes no sense, but I don't think that's 1,000 feet long, the parcel.
No, but because of where the poles were located, that was their answer. We actually did ask them not to create an underground separate district specifically for the Civic Center. It was connected to the rail project. So they identified the pole on the opposite side of Fair Oaks and then required us to connect it to several other poles down Fair Oaks, which would clear the Civic Center project. And then also on Station Lane, going that way, Maple direction, they identified a couple of other poles that needed to be part of that district in order to complete their undergrounding circuit.
And how many lineal feet was that?
I don't recall how many lineal feet, but I do know it exceeded our 1.4 plus the 5 years.
Okay.
No.
So essentially, when they were saying other poles, then essentially it was going transformer to transformer probably.
Right.
So we can go out and actually look and measure ourselves, but it makes sense that it would be transformer.
And it also, in addition to being transformer,
Then it's gotta go.
It's gotta be the type of wires. It's more expensive to underground certain types of wires than it is other types of wires.
Okay. Are there any public comments on this?
I don't think I have one more question.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, Mike.
No, I already asked it, passed it. But my question, as I'm looking at this, there are a number of purchasers for these credits, which implies that other cities or other towns have managed to make this work. Do we have any idea what characteristics they have that we don't, that makes it, financially sensible for them to do this? Because the numbers you're looking at, it seems ridiculous.
Yeah, so when there's other contributors to an underground utility district, and those are the private residents with undergrounding that need to go back to their homes. And so if you're creating a larger underground district, let's say for instance we created one on Atherton Avenue, there would be private contributors to those districts as well. That would, we'd pay our 1.4 million if that was the cost of our section of it, and then they would contribute the rest of the cost as a private required amortized contribution over 20, 30 years, whatever the agreement was, or they could pay it up front when you establish the underground district itself. So these communities, I can tell you, a recent community that I worked for, in Belvedere, they did underground districts all the time. And the town was required to pay its share, but mainly the impetus for it that garnered all the support from the residents was views. So they're, ocean views, bridge views, whatever. Here, there's less of that. It's more of a safety concern. Poles down, trees down. But they were formed all the time, and they used Rule 28 money. They had 2 major corridors. Absent those corridors, all the residents contributed for the district. And the town just did little pockets here and there. And they received a lot more than our $25,000 a year that we get. I don't know why that's different.
How much did that cost?
Those districts, per resident, if they chose to do it, they're smaller parcels, the average was $25,000 to $35,000.
And they paid it over 5 years?
Some residents paid it over 20, some residents paid it up front. And I do need to correct the 30 to 60 day issue, Mike, that you asked. That's once we've identified a purchaser, then it's probably 30 to 60 days. If we haven't identified a purchaser, or there's not one out there, it could be longer.
Okay. So when you talked to PG&E previously, that was with respect to the Caltrain electrification project?
Yes.
And so I guess my question would be, well, if we talk to them about just Fair Oaks, would it be different? I mean, so I'm not sure why we'd have to go down the tracks. And I'd like to get an assessment about what that cost would be. So, because if it's not too far from the 1.4 million or the 1.5 million, which we could have, including the 5 years, then how much would it cost us if we were to go out and buy it to be able to underground the wires in front of the Civic Center building? I think that would be of value to the town.
We can certainly do that.
I think we should do that.
One of the attractive options, if you could find a buyer at 50 or 55% on your dollar, then you get another $700,000 to go towards the Civic Center.
Yeah.
So that kind of, I mean, we've been collecting this little 20 money a long time to get up to 1.4.
All right, yes, Wally, public comments are now open.
Just a question, George. Have you looked at how much it would cost us if we asked them to put in another transformer so they could shorten the line to match what?
No, we haven't.
I mean,
But it could be part of the
it's something to think about. I don't know how much transformers cost,
Right.
but that could be an answer, okay?
Any other public comments? Closed public comments, back to council, final discussion item.
So, I'll interject a little bit. I'm gonna kind of echo what Rick was saying. If there may be, this is, even though obviously the money's there, we have a little bit of time to play with, and I think that finding out what the cost of doing Fair Oaks would be, because if we can do that and find out if anybody else is in the market selling, maybe reducing the cost of something like that to consider.
Okay. You done? Okay, my only comment would be that it'd be nice to know if somebody is actually looking for them today. And for me, I'd rather have the money than be able to look out from the front of the Civic Center and see no lines for 20 feet, okay? Because you're gonna be able to see them elsewhere. And we may be short on cash, we may not, we don't know, we're gonna find out next, in a week, so, right? So hopefully we're going. But, I think that more information is necessary before we make a decision, and so perhaps we come back and revisit this again with those 2 things in mind that you were asked to kind of look into.
Can do.
Okay. Okay. So, the next one is the one that the people in the back of the room have been waiting for. Except for Joe, he came late.
They're very patient.
Yeah, that's here, that's good. Okay, Provide direction and discussion and direction, so it's again, a secondary time that we're having this conversation on the restated franchise agreement between the town of Atherton and Recology for removal and processing of our waste material, organics, and recyclables.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, following your discussion at a prior meeting, the council had the staff return with a brief rate comparison to similar agencies such as Hillsborough, Ross, Woodside, Portola Valley, Tiburon, Belvedere, et cetera. The council also asked staff to investigate any opportunity to partner with Portola Valley and Woodside as they explore their extensions to their franchises with Green Waste. As you heard earlier this evening from the representative from Green Waste, that timing does not quite match up, but they're interested if the town were to put something out on the street. So staff did conduct a brief survey, and in your staff reports you've got comparative rates for trash types as well as green waste. And we also sent around that the mayor received from SBWMA a survey of the rates of the SBWMA agencies. So that went out via email to you earlier today. So you, I mean, those you've seen before. But, so you have both of those to compare just for review and discussion. So staff's looking for some feedback and direction from the council. If you wanted to put something on the street, we would come back to you with an RFP to engage a consultant to assist us. We don't have the staff time or resources to do it ourselves, so we'd hire a consultant using the rate stabilization fund and have that consultant draft the RFB to go out on the streets for refuse services, put that out, see what we get, that comes back, and then you can make a decision at that point. Or you could direct staff, you know, we don't want to do that. So Mr. City Manager, bring back the amended franchise agreement and we'll sign that. So with that, you have the staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mike, do you have any questions on this?
No, I look forward to the conversation, but no questions right now.
Any other questions? Any questions? Yes.
I thought that the organic part in Atherton, the first one was free. There's no cost.
The first two are free.
Yep, these are additional
Am I
cards.
misreading it?
These are additional cards.
Those are additional cards, the number of additional cards that we pay $20 to $25.
One additional card over two.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that
The
true?
table might not be.
No, you guys don't pay additional. We're the only agency that funds or that bills our residents for green cards other than the basic suite.
Yeah, there's lots of people, they've got velvet, I mean, there's all kinds of.
Well,
Outside the SBWMA.
Ours, SBWMA.
Oh, SBWMA.
Okay.
So these are additional. Great.
Are there any public comments? Are there any other questions? Any public comments? Seeing none, we'll close public comments and we'll come back for discussion. Mike, would you like to go first, or you want to listen for a while?
No, I'd like to listen. I'd like to listen.
Okay. Any other comments? Any comments? Carrie, do you have any comments?
Trashed out.
I'll just more or less repeat what I said last time we looked at it, because I do want to make sure that we're clear. I look at this a lot like the situation we have with the fire district. We're getting very, very good service, and as I mentioned, Joe LaMariana and his team do a great job of looking at new technology, and if you haven't been up there for that facility, you should go up on one of the tours and look at that. Gino and Mike do a great job in making sure that people pick up the trash and we're serviced. I just think that the rate we're paying, due to a number of items, such as some of the growth that we've seen in neighbors and things like that, without understanding what we're comparing it to is something that we should at least consider. And I think that, it doesn't cost us anything. The Recology contract is on the table. We've negotiated it as far as we can. There was some give and take on both sides. Thank you very much for that. But that's essentially where I am on it, and you know, our rates are high compared to our neighbors, but there's not a question with regards to the service. So that's my opinion.
Well, our rates are high compared to the trash rates, I guess, all the rates for Woodside and Portola Valley. For the other cities, actually, our rates are lower.
Well, I compare our rates to the rates with the other people in the contract.
The other people in
Send
the
out,
contract, they're not
that
on
I had
there.
guys, well,
That's
I
not
gave it to
spreadsheet.
George, and he sent that, you know, Joe
I
gave us
didn't
that,
see
yeah.
So I have a quick question. We have no commercial except for a couple of schools, right? But I mean, we don't, and the circle.
Right, that's it.
But do we pay for all the commercial garbage, collections and the expense for the, you know, the commercial rates? Do we pay, into that, or do we pay like a percentage of, is it based on a percentage of how much use we would have?
We pay a percentage of what, you know, what we do based on the audits, okay? There's an annual audit that goes on between the middle of April and the middle of May. They send the trucks out, they collect the hours and the truck time, and then they allocate that out based on what that is.
And so I understand there's gonna be a new facility built, or possibly a new facility built, and more new equipment and everything, and we would be responsible for our share of that, right? To pay into, like, say, a new commercial processing facility, which we don't really use that much. Is that based on a percentage, or is that like based on per capita, or what?
Well, that's based on a number of things, that currently we're looking at, but it goes into the rates that we're paying for the tip fees, and the tip fees are based on how much tonnage you're sending up there. And then that gives us the capital. So SBWMA does not make any money, but most of the time, there's a little bit of money left over, and then we put that into our capital fund, and we use that for funding, or if we have a specific need, we go out and we raise the rates. So they're looking at, you know, right now we have a multi-stream, what's called a multi-stream process. That multi-stream process is one where we fill things up in different buckets, and then the blue buckets go to what's called the material recovery facility, and that gets sorted then, and then they send that out to the different people that will process that. And there have been some problems with getting it processed, because a lot of it has gone overseas, and so there's a substantial amount of review and capital intensive equipment that we're looking at running some pilots on, and we're looking at also them growing over the next couple of years that will maybe clean up that process. So there's that process. The pickup, you know, the franchise agreement is picking up the trash and taking it to the San Carlos facility. If in fact we were to go out for a bid, then we would want to look at what would it cost to not only pick it up and A, take it up to San Carlos, but B, take it to a different facility that they would have, and they could process it, and what that cost might be. But you there's a fair amount of capital intensive work that's going on right now, because the facility is old. I realize it's in generality, but it is old, and technology has moved on, and so, we need to renew a lot of the equipment that's up there, and so there's, you know, 20, 30 million potentially, and they're working hard not to allow it to push the building out, although that may change over time, but there's a lot of capital intensive work.
Mr. Mayor, I think perhaps to clarify, correct me if I'm wrong, Councilmember, but if the SBWMA expands their San Carlos facility and expands the commercial line, what is Atherton's share of that cost going forward? Is it based on our commercial percentage of waste, or do we have a different allocation?
No, the way that is right now, I brought this up when we had our study session. There's a commercial rate for picking stuff up, and they track that tonnage, but the processing is spread. It's not a commercial rate. So if they were to bring in today, if they were to bring in capital equipment that is only going to do, say, organics processing of restaurants to meet the new bill, that would be borne by everybody, not just the restaurants or the commercial aspect. So that's how that works. Joe and I have talked about it several times, that we would maybe have a commercial rate that we would apply, right, Joe? But that's, you know, that would be up to the JPA board, and everybody has commercial except for us and Hillsborough.
And our share of the SBWMA allocation is about 8% now, or is it less than that? What is it?
It's 2.5%, 3%. But when I've done the calculations for our numbers, if we were to change, it's like 6%. We were 6% of the last audit, 6-point-something% of the last audit that y'all did, 6.2, I think.
Do we have an idea what the RFP would cost?
My swag is between 30 and 50. I just thought out.
That's the other follow-up question, Councilmember Weiss, is, you know, how much of an effort would it take of staff to go through the process? That's my really big concern about this, of going out for an RFP, interviewing, I mean, just putting that whole new deal together is, I think, going to take a lot of staff time, and I feel nervous about that, especially because I want my staff, I want all of you guys to be really laser focused on this civic center, and I kind of feel like it's gonna detract and be a distraction. That's,
And I'll amend that to say not just the staff, but also the council.
yeah.
How much of our attention is to bring in a new provider? I don't know.
I'm just
I feel like with the Civic Center and possibly the water treatment facility, we've got a lot on our plate.
Well, but don't you, if I could just make a comment on that, and George could comment as well, but you can't do apples to apples, and we already have a contract. You can't do apples to apples without saying, okay, we've already got a bid for this.
Yeah.
So you have to bid this. If somebody wants to make an alternate bid, that's another thing to look at, but I don't think it would be fair to the ecology to say, hey, we wanna run a bid, and, yeah, but these other guys, they can bid whatever they want. I mean, it's gonna be very difficult to reevaluate.
So Recology could bid themselves?
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. They
Is
could.
it any thought been for a single stream, so they're not
Well, that's where they're going, single stream processing. So there's a pilot that's about to get started, so I'll be placing.
But that doesn't make it organic, the single stream?
They wanna take the food waste out of the black bins, all right?
Yeah.
As well as the commercial bins, and then currently we have 2 MOUs to work with 2 different processors where they put them in the anaerobic chambers, and then they create the methane gas. And then depending on how that works, we could build our own process and then capture that methane gas and use that to manage our.
To me, that, that sounds like a level.
So,
But, yeah, but that's the intent there, that's what they do.
so, through the chair,
Yeah.
or through the mayor chair. After I originally read the report, I really wasn't very pleased that Green Waste, but I get the point of not joining them. It's a little different when they're bidding on a project separately. So I think if in writing an RFP or an RFP, you'd have the language in extending what the agreement is, what the terms of the agreement, so you can lock yourself in based on what we want to accomplish. I think that that's going to be important in identifying it as far as how comparison, because, we've said it, I think both Bill and everybody has said it, it's not an issue of who we're dealing with, it's just an issue of money and long-term agreement and the amount of savings, but we really don't know what those if there would be a savings, what that savings would be, because we have nothing to compare it to, other than ratepayers within the same agreements, in essence. I guess I would be supportive of the fact that to see, I think we still have a little bit of time to play with if we wrote an RFP to figure out who was out there and if it was anything in comparison to what this agreement would be and what those rates would be. I think I would have to look at that. It's big money. I mean, it's big money with the duration of the whole agreement, so.
Yeah, the current contract.
Garbage contract. There is big.
The contract. Yeah, the contract that we have on the table is a 15-year contract.
I know, and this is gonna be, yeah.
It's a good contract.
Yeah. Okay, we don't have to make a decision tonight, do we?
Just providing staff with direction. If you want to go out on the street, we've got to draft an RFP to get a consultant.
I don't wanna
To do that.
right now.
We got to do an RFP to get a consultant to write the RFP.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
That part is correct.
Can I comment?
Mike.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just heard Elizabeth say something that rang important to me, and I want to confirm it, because I have a different understanding of the process, which is the opportunity cost of having the staff or dedicated resource to this is real. But I thought I understood we'd be outsourcing a lot of this work, and George, you say how much would you expect that to cost? So there's dollar opportunity cost, and how much would you expect staff time to be spent on it?
So it would be between Robert and I to figure out how to write that RFP to get the consultant on board. Not sure how much time that would take. And then we would bring that back to the council. You'd have to review and approve that, put that on the street for 30 days to get a consultant to help us then write the request for bid for the actual trash agreement. That would be just management time by staff until that comes back to the council. Then the council would approve the RFP, that would go out on the street. Then everything would come back, you'd have to review all that. So that's the opportunity cost we're talking about. I don't even have an estimate of what that would be. Several meetings of the council, certainly several meetings with staff and the consultants. And then the staff time put together the RFP itself, which we would probably plagiarize from another agency, but as much as we could. And then the cost of that, as I mentioned to Councilmember Wiest, is a swag of 30 to 50K, which would come from the rate stabilization fund.
My personal, I'd like to just table this until after we, hear staff our bids next Wednesday. Maybe put it on the agenda for the next month.
I don't have a strong opinion.
Mike?
Yeah, assuming there's no real downside to kicking the can down the road a little bit, it makes sense to me we do that. If there's a real downside, I'd like to know now.
The only downside is time,
But we've got some
Yeah.
time.
No, we got time,
We
but
do.
a day at the front is the same as a day at the end, except for no one's yelling at you.
It's a colloquialism.
I think that you kind of got it already. I think it's going to be back to Rick.
Go ahead.
You know, the town is not paying for this out of its budget. It's coming out of all of your residents' budgets, okay? And have you really gotten many complaints about this? Then I personally think at the moment, you're wasting your time. Sorry. I will say, Bill, you and George have done a great job over the last 5 or 6 years in working with Recology. I've been very impressed with how you've been doing that. Thank you.
All right. So, I'm not sure where we are.
I have one to table it to next month, and then the others I haven't heard from.
Mike?
Well, it makes sense to me that if there's no real downside, let's kick it a month. I'm happy to kick it a month, and I heard that there's no real downside to it, although you did have a good line there, Bill. I can deal with that.
I agree with that. I will support that.
All right, let's do that.
All right.
So we're gonna open up the bids soon, so we'll know where we're gonna be. So we'll have you guys back, maybe we'll put it a little bit earlier on the contract.
On the agenda.
Because you've sat through 2 long meetings, at the end is your thing, so, maybe there's a special request that we could do them earlier.
Just for the record, he controls when you guys head to.
I did not say put them last.
Second to last.
All right. Okay. Next.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. All right, the last thing is a discussion on leaf blowers, item 21, and a possible restructuring of the use in town.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. A member of the council, in seeing the recent news article about Portola Valley, which is one of the attachments to the staff report, asked if the council could talk about the possibility of imposing restrictions on gas-powered leaf blowers in town. So staff did a bit of just cursory research and provided some regulations from other communities. Basically, we stole that from Portola Valley's staff work. They spent about 18 to 24 months going through their entire process. We stole some of that and did it in 10 minutes. But of course, it doesn't apply to Africa. We have to think about that. So we're just presenting that to the council for some direction. If you want us to invest some time and resources into it, we can do so. One of the suggestions was maybe even have the EPC begin to look at it because it does have an environmental component to it, and at least start that public conversation.
Questions?
I don't have a question, I just have.
Any questions, Mike?
Yeah, I do have a question. It simply relates to the efficacy of the electrical blowers. Do we have any sense if there's some on the market that will work on lots that are our size and, setting them up for failure, or if there's some products out there that actually work on large lots?
I don't have any information other than anecdotal. It could be a long extension cord or multiple batteries.
I've got an electrical one, Mike, and I can do my whole yard with the big battery. That then takes an hour to recharge, but I can do my yard with it. But there are ones that, as George mentioned, there are ones that have a power cord, but the other ones have lithium-ion batteries, and they can either be shorter or long.
And the efficiency is questionable.
I don't have a problem with it. I understood from somebody talking to George, raised the point of, well, when the leaves are wet, perhaps they don't have the same power to blow the leaves, but it's not always wet here. It's only wet a few months out of the year. Unfortunately, it's now.
Anecdotally, at the last San Francisco Airport Roundtable meeting, one of the public members of the public brought his electric leaf blower to the meeting, and he came up to me in the beginning and he says, I want to just demonstrate how loud the sound of the tree. I said, not during the meeting. We'll maybe let you. So after the meeting, actually had 2, and it was very loud. But it's almost like the leaf blowers, the gas is terrible to me. But the problem that I have, even with leaf blowers, period, is that it kicks up dust and kicks up road toxins and pollutants. And we have an asphalt driveway, and my gardeners, they do a great job, and everything is spick and span when they leave, but the leaves on my citrus trees have all this black gunk because of all the road dust and everything that is thrown up. And it's just, and then you see these guys blowing the dust on the easements, on the right-of-ways, and it's just like clouds of dust. So I would like to ban, no. No.
There's a question in there
No.
somewhere.
I had my
There's a comment.
question. So, yes, I'd rather ban all blowing activity.
Question mark.
Any place.
Okay. All right, good. Any other questions on this? Okay, any comments from the public? Wally?
All I can say, in Lindenwood, we're very interested in this, and I would say the general view tends towards either electric or none. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I don't think you're out of order in suggesting that, Elizabeth, okay? I mean, we used to have just rakes, okay?
Yes, a big broom or something.
Okay, let's bring it back to the council. Mike, you have any comments?
Yeah, if the question is this worth exploring, the answer to me is yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yes.
All right, any other comments from council?
Yeah, I got
We
it.
have comments from
I
Elizabeth.
like the idea of referring it to the EPC.
I have a comment.
Okay.
If you got time.
Yeah, we have plenty of time for you.
Obviously, this is not something, I mean, we obviously regulate time of use and everything else. I think that the efficiency, the industry related to blowers has changed over the years. Blowers today, even the gas two-stroke motors are more efficient than they were even 5 years ago. Electric is the trend. I think that California in due time will, everything as our cars are going to be, they will be, but the manufacturers and the efficiencies of the electric systems, it's not the noise difference because electric blowers are equally as irritating as the regular blower. So it's a have or have not. But I think that we also have a community of trees which produce a large volume, which we know based on our green bins. I think that beautification of the community is a big concern, getting rid of these and transitioning people away from this. I think the state of California is going to do that for us. So I kind of think that this is really, at this point, kind of a non-point. I don't think we have a huge problem of huge complaints related to, because I don't get them. But I do think that we will be transitioning out of gas blowers here in the very near future. But I think the competition from manufacturers that make those blowers has to increase for people to agree to this extension cords and battery life for commercial operations, which majority of our residents have. Our gardeners can't plug in all these batteries all over the place in their cars while they're out doing, you know, trees and shrubbery. So that's a whole nother policy issue. So for us, I don't think the efficiency of trying to regulate it at this point makes sense, other than what we do.
So I think that there are too many variables in this. There was the question in the staff report, what about the town? What about in an emergency, like when a tree goes down and they're there in the middle of the night cleaning up? You know, can they use a gas blower because they might be more effective? I'd like to see more things go electric. And so I'm kind of drawn to this item, at least to, because I do think the electrics are a little bit less noisy, but they're all noisy. But I also think that this is something that's going to take a long, long time to sort out and get public input on. And if we weren't concerned about saving residents money over the next 15 years, where we will spend over approximately $75 million as a town for our services with all the escalations, then I can't see that we should be spending any staff time on looking into this at all.
I think we should have a little vote, Mr. Mayor.
Well, we can do that. It says we will review and discuss. We're discussing it. It says review and discuss. It didn't say a vote. So George is taking notes and he'll decide what he needs to do. And it says review
Well,
and discuss.
from my perspective, I got 3 okay to explore using the EPC.
That's fine. I just gave my 2 cents. I'm allowed to say my cents. Okay.
So I'll direct this staff report to the EPC and
Yeah, that's fine.
advise that the council asks that they look into the issue.
Right. Okay.
Adjournment.
No.
Yes.
We're not running it. I have a council discussion item, probably take about 15 minutes, no. I think all of you, and as well as myself, regularly get questions, do you wanna nominate anybody for the grand jury? I'd like to just make sure you bring, if you have any ideas of who might be good, please, you can bring those to Teresa. You can do your nomination yourself, but I asked Teresa if maybe the town couldn't be making a nomination, and so this is where we ended up.
Yeah, so that's good. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, maybe what we should do is ask Teresa to send out in the Friday blast a little blurb about whether anybody would like to serve on the grand jury.
That's a good idea.
I
And
think,
contact.
and well, they can contact Teresa and.
Yeah, because they need to have a recommendation, you know?
Yeah, I think they need I don't want the individuals who would be interested just to directly contact the judge.
Yeah, right.
Who send us a
So,
letter.
to Teresa.
We just provide the grand jury with their names, and then the grand jury will reach out to them.
Right. But I think if we send it out in the Friday blast, that would be a good thing. More likely we'll get somebody that way then.
Yeah, okay.
Good, got it.
Okay, now we can move to adjourn.
Exactly.
Okay. All in favor?
Thank you.
See you, Mike, thank you.